Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of September 17th. We have a loaded agenda tonight with many articles to be debated and voted on for the booklet. We have a few guests with regards to Articles 3 through 8 and a couple of additional guests on Article 3. So Jim, can you please introduce Labor Council for a quick presentation? Jim?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Yep.
Mark, if you're okay, I'll just give the whole FinCom a quick update as to how we're going to start off this meeting, and then we can get into questions afterwards. So Mark and I spoke earlier today. The game plan for tonight, obviously you have the contracts to go through. I've asked some of the board members to be on here, the select board members. So Jim O'Neill, Nancy's on here, and I believe Mark is too. So we're going to have Kevin give a brief introduction. Kevin Feely's been our labor counsel for probably about 20 plus years. He has a good history with the town. He's a resident of Walpole. I've asked him to kind of give an overview of the collective bargaining process and some of, what my role is, the select board's role, the finance committee's role, and then touch upon some of the issues that have been brought up, just, how they came to be. And then we also have police union president, John Murphy, he can be seen on Rich Kelleher's screen, the deputy. He's asked to make a couple of statements in regards to the contract for the police officers. Mark and I have talked. It's a little out of the norm, but since they're not allowed to be in the room, Mark agreed to allow them to make a brief statement, and then hand it off to any board members that may want to make a comment for the select board, and then finally the police chief, his overview, and then we can get into questions. So if everybody is good with that and understands that, I'll kind of hand it off to Kevin to talk about the role of everyone involved here. So with that, Labor Council, Kevin Feely.
Hello, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Thank you, Jim. It's good to see some familiar faces and nice to meet new ones. What Jim asked me to do, he said that there could be several questions, so I will just give a brief overview and be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So collective bargaining in the public sector world is a somewhat strange and imperfect art. It's not a science for sure. Chapter 150E of the general laws is the collective bargaining law, and it defines in a town the employer as being the Board of Selectmen, and in Walpole the statutory scheme would have the town administrator be the individual responsible to negotiate collective bargaining agreements, always with the advice and then ultimately the ratification of the Board of Selectmen. The way Chapter 150E works is this: when an agreement is reached between the Board of Selectmen and the union, that agreement is not effective until town meeting appropriates funds adequate to support the additional cost items necessary to fund that contract for year one of the collective bargaining agreement. So that any agreement is, as a matter of law, tentative until town meeting has had the opportunity to vote on whether or not to appropriate funds for the first year of the collective bargaining agreement. Once the first year funds are appropriated, the town is obligated to pay those whatever increases in cost items are included in the agreement for years 2 and 3. 3 years being the maximum length of any collective bargaining agreement in the public sector. That leaves, as an integral part of the process, the Finance Committee having an opportunity to weigh in and advise town meeting as to whether or not it suggests that the agreements be funded or not. In my view, and this is based on, I should have mentioned this, there is of course a state agency that is responsible for enforcing the collective bargaining law. That state agency used to be called the Labor Relations Commission. Now it's called the Department of Labor Relations. So part of what I'm saying is based on the law, and part of it is based on what the Labor Relations Commission and now the DLR tells us about the law. So when we deal with funding issues before either the Finance Committee, Finance Commission, or town meeting, the analysis and the decision is supposed to be based on the financial and the cost items, not on the any other non-monetary considerations. Now, that's easy to say. I understand that really by definition, when you are considering whether or not to support funding a contract or not, you will look at the totality. I certainly understand that. But that does not change what we, that is the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator, are legally required to do, and that is to bargain in good faith as they see fit with the union on any mandatory subjects of collective bargaining. That dovetails into an issue that Jim did ask me to specifically mention, because I guess at an earlier meeting it was brought up. There is and for anyone who questions this, I understand your concerns. The issue having to do with stipends related to medical service provider equipment that police officers have in the contract. Logic maybe would suggest that if what we are doing as a town is giving employees tools that will help them more efficiently or effectively perform their job, why would we have to bargain over that? That makes perfectly good sense. But what we have are decisions from the Department of Labor Relations that tell us that when it comes to this type of an issue, there is a bargaining obligation that the town must meet before it can have, whether it's police or fire, perform additional life-saving or emergency type services. It used to be the law the case law through the 2004 to 2010 said that you could not even put a defibrillator on an ambulance until a union had agreed that it could be placed there. And that's a Town of Arlington case that was decided where a local hospital donated 3 defibrillators, 1 for each ambulance in the town. That standard has lessened slightly, but there was a decision in 2017 coming out of the town of Natick, and I'm just going to read one sentence from the decision because it explains where the state agency that enforces these provisions was coming from. This had to do with the Natick Police Union filed an unfair labor practice charge against the town of Natick when the town required police officers to use Narcan. And in that decision, the DLR said that when you give something like Narcan to a police officer to use, you are by definition impacting their workload. When an officer is required to administer medication, he has to evaluate whether the victim should receive Narcan, the amount they should receive, offer medical advice, and participate in specialized training prior to being able to administer Narcan. So the DLR determined you have a bargaining obligation. To put it in slightly simpler terms, what they said is, you have the right to tell the union members that you will use, whether it's a defibrillator, Narcan, EpiPen, whatever the case may be, but they have the obligation to demand to bargain over that decision. And in Walpole, I would say that we have been fortunate in that the unions have never protested, as far as I can recall, the addition of any kind of additional life-saving or emergency service that could be provided. What happened here was they did ask for a stipend or some additional compensation for these items that have been added to their tool belt over the years. In my experience, it's not unusual. I work in right now in 14 different towns, and I would safely say that in all 14, the police unions have some stipend, whether it's in a dollar amount or a percentage, for the addition of some or all of the items that we're talking about. When Jim and the board negotiated this stipend, a very good and clever idea when they added the language that said the stipend that has been added to the contract covers not just these things, but any other medical life-saving services or devices that we propose in the future. And I thought it was a good and fair agreement under those circumstances. So in the future, when we have the next advancement for something that would be added to the police cruisers to help save lives, the parties will have agreed the 2% stipend already is the compensation that would be paid to the employees. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions about the process or about the stipend or any other issue that you may have.
Okay. Questions about the process here? Anyone? Yes, Lisa.
Hi, thank you. Through you, Mark. I understand the last bit that the clause that this stipend, this 2% stipend, will hold for any other medical equipment that should ever be invented in the future. But does that just mean within the 3 years of this contract, or does that mean forever? And if so, isn't that imminently challengeable if it is state law that all these medical service equipment things can be challengeable? Is that really a meaningful addition in our contract?
That's through you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
That's an excellent question, and something I should have mentioned when I was speaking before. So how the collective bargaining process works in the public sector world is before the expiration of an agreement, both sides have the opportunity to propose changes to any term that's already in the agreement or anything else that's a mandatory subject of collective bargaining. If no proposal is made to change any language or figure in the contract, it carries over into the next contract. So in this case, the next time this contract is negotiated, if no one proposes and agrees to a change to this language, it will be part of the next contract. That exact same language will be included in the next collective bargaining agreement. And in all contracts going into the future, unless and until the parties agree to make a change.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Sure. Yep.
So just to be clear, although we are required to have these things bargained about, this clause will, if it stands in the contract, free us from that requirement and is not challengeable by state law.
Correct. In my view, it would not be challengeable by state law. It will remain in the contract. So if something happened in the future, in theory, the union could say, we're going to file a grievance because we think this is outside the scope of what we agreed to. But as a general, that's a hypothetical. In general, the language, in my view, is tight. That it says this covers these things and anything new from a medical standpoint that is added. So I would feel confident in saying that this will cover anything else that comes up in the future that is medically related to their first responder duties that is added to a police cruiser or any of their other functions. Yes, I feel confident in that.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry to monopolize everything. Is there a big line, Mark, or can I ask one more question? I think it's interesting that the town has to approve year one, which I know our administrator says we can afford in all the 7 contracts. In fact, we can afford what's laid out in year one, but we wouldn't have to pay this cost until year 3. So please remind me, what would the dollar amount be in year 3 that would be added to this contract?
Jim sent us a worksheet. So year 3 of this contract would, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, is 163,000 over the level that's in year 2, correct?
Yeah.
You're still muted, Jim.
Correct. And if I could just follow up with something, Kevin, if you could jump in, you know, the charter is very specific. You have to bring the new contracts forward to town meeting, and town meeting appropriates year 1. It doesn't mean they don't appropriate year 2 and 3. Town meeting appropriates every single line every year. So town meeting could exercise an option to you know, not fund a specific line item each year. Kevin, that's correct on that. So it doesn't take the authority away from town meeting.
Mr. Chairman, if town meeting were to, let's say, delete funding from an article that's to be paid, those funds would be deleted, but the town would still be obligated to pay it in year 3, Jim. So town meeting can say, we're not going to fund that particular item and take that money out of the budget, but the town would still be obligated to pay that amount. Now, what happens is it would have to be done either by other cuts in the budget, whether it be personnel or some other, capital item in the police budget.
Thank you, Kev.
Now, procedurally, going across all these contracts, if Finance Committee votes no action on a contract, it's my understanding from discussions that our recommendation to town meeting would be no action. At town meeting, it's expected that the Board of Selectmen would present a substitute motion for favorable action, and the body would move to make that the main motion and either vote yay or nay on it. And if town meeting decides they don't want to support the contract, what position does that put the parties in after town meeting closes?
So if town meeting does not appropriate sufficient funds for year 1 of the collective bargaining agreement, the parties will have to return to the bargaining table. The memoranda of agreement that are before you are all tentative, subject to town meeting funding. So if town meeting does not fund, it returns to the table.
Okay. Other general questions, Denny?
And what are the union's rights, since there would be then without a contract while it was being renegotiated?
So the rights of the union are that the terms of the collective bargaining agreement that are in existence today would continue into the future until eventually a new collective bargaining agreement is ratified. It can be a bit of a complicated rationale behind that, but that's the long and the short of it. For police and fire, there is if the parties are unable to resolve the contract for a sufficient period of time, there is a separate state agency that takes jurisdiction over the case to try and mediate and ultimately arbitrate a decision. That state agency is called the Joint Labor Management Committee. They only have jurisdiction over police and fire contracts. And once they take jurisdiction of a case, we would be unable to change anything, even if we wanted to at that time.
So would that basically be coming to mediation or binding arbitration?
Correct.
Okay. Other general questions? Andrew?
Yes, this is for Labor Council, Kevin Feely. Thank you so much for your overview here. I had a question about a comment you made. You said it's not unusual that you work in 14 other towns. And to me, just to kind of show my cards on the table, to me, the issue personally is not the pay increases that come with this stipend. I think they're fully deserved and actually should be applauded from Chief Carmichael's memo to us dated September 11th. He talks about, and he's mentioned this many times, 241 overdoses, 41 fatalities, 106 administrations of Narcan. And so thank you. Literally, the Walpole Police Department has saved many lives. And so to me, I think the union is deserving of the cumulative pay increase in this contract, this memorandum of agreement. My issue is the stipend system, like barnacles to a ship that they would add up over time. So one of my big questions I had for Jim Johnson, and now for you, Kevin, is just how common is this? And so actually in Chief Carmichael's memo to us, on the final page, he lists some surrounding towns. And it just jumped out to me that, several of these towns like Norwood, Foxborough, Sharon, require and I want to make sure I understand Chief Carmichael's table here correctly. And it's on page 13 of our packet that Jim sent out to us. I want to make sure I understand this correctly, but some towns, it seems from this table, require police departments to administer AED and Narcan, but maybe not EpiPens, and then there's no medical stipend. And I just wanted to revisit your comment, Mr. Feely, about that this is not unusual. Specifically, is a 2% increase not unusual? Because, some of these stipends that are listed here are $650 for EMT in Dover, or, $275 for EMT in Rentham. So my question for Mr. Feely is, you say it's not unusual to have this medical stipend, but is a 2%, like a 2% base salary increase? Is that a typical medical stipend?
I would say that's more difficult for me to say if that is the most typical, if that would be the typical, the typical number, because you're right, different contracts have different stipends amounts. Some express them in flat dollars and some in percentages. I could not say the 2% is the most typical number. I could not say that. I'm looking at Chief Carmichael's chart, just the way you are, and 2%, I would say in general, is not the most typical when you look at his chart. Considering my communities where I work, which some of them are on this list, some are not, I could tell you that that I represent two large towns in the Merrimack Valley that both have, one has a 2% and one has a 5% stipend for this type of item. Generally, I would say this, that when considering whether or not this amount is appropriate, some people just don't like stipends, and I get that. The other consideration, though, is what is the total compensation? Because that ultimately, that really is the determinant of whether you have, 5% in stipends and a lower base salary, or a higher base salary and no stipends. The question is, what is the total compensation? And I've said this to Jim before. One of the hidden gems from a financial standpoint in the Walpole contracts, and I would say that they are unprecedented in the last 2.5 decades, are the changes in the health insurance contributions that Jim and the Board of Selectmen, in and with the cooperation of the unions, because that is the key. It would not happen without the unions being on board, have been able to achieve. The largest cost driver besides pensions in every town is health insurance. And in Walpole, the foresight that they had to have the structure of grandfathering some people and then increasing the rates down the road for new employees is again, to repeat myself, it's a hidden gem and should be considered when looking at the total compensation package, in my opinion. Sorry for the long-winded answer, Mr. Flowers.
Thank you so much. That's it for me for now.
Jim, quick question, and it might be better for Marilyn or Jody. When you mention pensions, is only the actual salary considered for pension, or are stipends added to pension calculations?
I'll actually lean on Kevin for this one. From my understanding, it's what are you expected to make regularly each year? Overtime can't be factored into it. So Kev, did I hit that on the head, or do you want to speak a little bit more towards that?
Yes, generally a permanent and regular stipend would include pension deductions, though Maryland may have a different take.
Helen's still hiding here?
Oh, it's whatever your annual salary would be, whether you get it in a stipend or within your pay rate. It's if you're entitled to that every year, then it's pensionable.
Okay. Alrighty. So if a person is, say, training officer for 3 years, then those 3 years he got the stipend would be part of his pension, but when it got canceled, it goes back to his base pay for those future salary calculations.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's not a savings to the town, including something as a stipend or including it as part of base pay. Pension-wise, it's the same. Okay.
From a pension perspective, yes, there would be no additional savings.
Okay. Denny.
On that same topic, for overtime calculations, is the stipend included in the overtime calculation?
No, I was pretty specific in the language that we offered there.
Yeah,
It's their
that's what I
base
thought.
pay, and it specifically refers to the chart on that sheet that I gave you. So if you make $1,000 a week, if you're a step one, it's your $1,000 a week. It's not your night differential education incentive and whatever other there's a couple of other stipends in there for, detective and everything. It's your base pay up top. We were very specific in that language.
And it's regular shift. It's the base shift. It's not
Yep.
the add-ons for other shifts. Okay.
Yes.
And just from Chief, just a question, Chief Carmichael, if you don't mind. Just trying to recall what you'd said last week when we talked, or when we talked last on this topic. Yeah. So there's been no increased pay for the additional duties in the past for the Narcan and in other medical life-saving equipment, paramedic type work that was, first responder type work. That was the word I was looking for. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So if, in one of my memos, I believe I mentioned, going back to 2005, that contract for the police union, 2005 to 2008, that addressed some other issues. There was, that's when they did the increase in the retirement pay. It was like a 9%. That was one of the big things that got into the contract. In addition to that, we got rid of the first step sergeant. And so we moved them up so that they were a certain percentage away from patrolmen, and that kind of stuck in the contract. The AED was an issue back at that time in 2005 because we applied for and received a grant, and that grant paid for the Walpole Police Department had to have the ability to install AEDs in all of our fleet. And so we did that. We purchased them, we trained on them, we implemented them into our policies. And since 2005, Walpole police officers have been using the AED on the scene of medical calls. And at the time, there was contract negotiations taking place. However, they were concentrating on some other issues that they were getting into the contract. And the AED, they just agreed to implement it, and they've been doing it for 15 years now. Moving forward to 2011, when we started to see the increase in overdoses from the opioid epidemic, I actually had the opportunity to be on two of our governor's opioid task forces. Governor Deval Patrick was in office at that point. They made some changes in the law, they made some changes in the CMR, and they allowed police officers to start carrying and administering naloxone because we were responding to overdoses, and frankly, people were dying. We went to the union, and the union again just agreed to carry that life-saving tool because we were seeing firsthand what was happening in our own community. So once again, they went above and beyond, what we normally ask them to do traditionally, and and they took it on. And not only did they take on the Narcan, we go back to those scenes afterwards, and we engage the family. We engage that person who suffered from the opioid disorder, and we get them into treatment and resources and that type of thing. So we've changed how we deal with that situation. And as I mentioned last week, after that, we had some situations where we were responding to people suffering from anaphylactic shock from an allergic reaction. And I worked with a mom whose child had suffered from that. And we wanted to use that as another way to implement this tool into our kind of toolbox. And again, also be able to serve the community better. As I mentioned before, the law allows, we have to be first responders, but the law also allows that to extend to other supplementary tools like the AED, like the EpiPen, and like naloxone. And so our police officers, I'm extremely grateful to them for what they do and their commitment to the town. Like, they've accepted the AED. We've been using it for 15 years. They didn't ask for anything. They took on naloxone. They didn't ask for anything. They've saved many lives. And now I'm asking them, to do this EpiPen because it's important for our public safety in Walpole. And, I think that they've just in such good faith have showed their dedication and a commitment to us. And I'm just hoping that we can get this implemented and get that in there in the contract. I know Mr. Flowers brought up some of those other towns, and he's right. That's why we did the comparisons. Many of them do get, an additional stipend. But if you notice also on that same chart, if you look at the number of departments in the area that carry EpiPen, almost none of them do. And so once again, Walpole, we like to lead the way on certain things. And this is just another way, we're going to be the first department around us that's going to be carrying it. Hopefully that'll set a trend in other areas. And, there's other comparisons also in the packet. I know you guys have all received this one, where as Attorney Feely mentioned, we're looking at the overall, compensation that officers are paid. And, our Walpole police officers are towards the bottom in that respect. And so, I've just seen them make so many sacrifices, and they're always so responsive in anything that we ask them to do as a community, and certainly everything that they do for me as a chief. And I think we're very fortunate to have that. So I'm just hopefully, I don't mean to downplay this and say that this isn't a big issue, but it's something that I think they are very deserving of it, just from what they've shown me over the years, and Deputy Chief Kelleher.
Right, and you answered my next question, which was
Denny, real quick. We've drifted away from general topics right into Article 3. And before we get too far in, I've promised time to the Patrolmen's Union president to make a couple of announcements and presentations.
Well, I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here. The reason...
Can you give us your name, please, so we can get it for the record?
Officer John Murphy.
Thank you.
So the reason I requested to be here through Jim was I watched the previous meeting while you guys pretty much only discussed our contract, and it seemed our contract was the big issue, especially the year 3 part of it. And it almost felt like we looked like we were selfish during that for asking what we were asking for. And I just wanted to clear that up, that during this pandemic, that is the last thing we have been. When all the unknown was going on, we were still at work every day, going into homes with these cases. We didn't know everything about this virus, and we still showed up every day and gave this town everything we had. Now, during that time, if we were being selfish, we could have cited a change in work environment and asked Jim to go back to the table like some departments did. Corrections did it. A lot of departments in other states did it, and they got pay increases for working through this pandemic, and we refused to do that. And then when it came down to negotiations, we were really close on a contract, and Jim told us to hold off because he wanted to see where the town was financially. We were more than willing to do that. Year one, we took a 1.5, and we just kept going up each year to give the town time to figure it out. Now, as far as the stipend, the medical stipend, that seems to be the big issue. So part of the reason I asked that, because I noticed other towns getting a stipend for it, and I felt like we should be no different. We love being able to provide that service to the community, and we will always do it. But it's getting to the point where we don't know what's going to be tacked on to us next. And what we did was agree to take any possible medical instrument on in the future and do it for that 2%. I know that 2%, it might seem like a lot compared to some other towns, but if you also look at these other towns, even the ones bordering us, we are severely underpaid compared to them. You look at a town like Norfolk, we're $20,000 below them. We have triple the amount of work that they're doing, and that's just one. And I felt like it was about time we were compensated for the amount that we do. And not for nothing, during this pandemic, it was pretty dark around here, and I feel as if our guys might be the one bright spot this community had. A lot of kids lost their summers, they lost their graduations, they didn't get to go to school, they didn't have their birthday parties, but the one thing that was consistent is that we were there for every one of them. We continued to show up for all their events. We were out spreading awareness with the masks. We were putting ourselves at risk. And it was just a little frustrating watching the previous meeting, and I almost felt like if you were watching it, you would have thought we were selfish for what we were asking. As far as the medical stipend, I heard one person mention that we should be thankful that we're given these tools, and we are, and it does help us. But using some of these tools is dangerous for us. Narcan, you're going onto a scene where someone had overdosed. It's either going to be heroin or fentanyl in the room, and that's pretty dangerous. Fentanyl, if it touches your hand, I mean, it could kill you. And so a lot of departments in the area, they do hazardous duty pay. They have all these other stipends. We just stuck to this one because we thought including all three names and anything in the future summed it up just fine. And that's all I really have to say right now. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. I hope you vote with us regardless. If you do or don't, we'll never turn our back on Walpole. We'll continue to be an outstanding police department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. All of us on the Finance Committee appreciate the efforts that go forward, especially in these trying times, from all of our town employees. So don't think of it as us as picking on you, but we're also wearing a hat of financial responsibility for the taxpayers. And I think that's where some of our members are coming from, where they see the price tag and they're wondering if this is our best option. But I'm sure we'll hear more debate across all the contracts going forward. So thank you for your time. Chief Carmichael, quick question. When you talked about when defibrillators came online, wasn't prior to that there an EMT stipend for the police department and we moved away from it?
Yes, that's correct. So Walpole police officers used to be EMTs. Before I became on the department, I know Chief Bailey's on here. The way they used to do it was there was a firefighter and a police officer that rode on the ambulance when they had an ambulance call. And then eventually, as the fire department, as the town began to expand and the fire department expanded, and they were able to increase their standard of care, we started to phase out the police officers from that role, and the fire department primarily took all that over. So at some point, right around 2005, we got rid of the EMT, the requirement to be an EMT and the EMT stipend, and we actually lowered our standard of care from EMT down to first responder. So we got rid of the stipend, but when that happened, we had to become first responders based under the law, and we kept and implemented the AED because just because of the timing, we happened to get the grant, and so we purchased all the AEDs and put them in the cruisers.
Okay. Thank you, Denny. Back on Article 3, you had some questions, specific.
I did, but actually the chief had addressed it. The biggest question I had, and so did Officer Murphy, just in talking about comparison to the other towns. And I think Mr. Feely's comment originally about the whole idea of total compensation is something that we should be looking at and understanding. And I think the stipend has a stigma and a name to it that seems to give a different opinion in looking at the total number. But, in the reality, it's the overall compensation that we should be evaluating and, comparison to what our competition is, because people may leave Walpole to go to other towns if that's the case. So we want to keep what we have and keep developing and growing. So those are my 2 cents. My questions were answered. Thank you.
Okay. Others, Mark, and then Brian.
So Chief Carmichael, I have a question. With this first responder training and activities that the police force is doing now, is this becoming like standard practice throughout the 351 cities and towns? I guess what I'm wondering is, the job of a policeman, of a fireman, it's changing. Technology is changing. Other things within society are changing. You're adjusting to it. Is like the police academy that all police go to, is this going to become kind of like normal practice, so that anyone applying for one of these jobs will go through this training, and so it becomes embellished in what your responsibilities are versus something that's been added on. But my point is this: I'm wondering, certainly we hire police officers, here are their duties. If we add to those duties, then we need to respond and adjust accordingly. But will these additional duties now become standard practice throughout the various cities and towns for their police force?
Chief?
So are you talking about the standard of care as far as first responder?
Right, exactly. In other words, one of the modules to become a police officer, there's firearms training, there's other things that this becomes a standard practice.
Yes, it already is. So Massachusetts general law requires police officers at the bare minimum to be at the level of first responder, that the first responder standard level of care. The next step is EMT and then paramedic, and goes up from there. So we're basically at the lowest level, first responder. So all police officers in Massachusetts have to have and maintain that certification. So each year when we go to in-service training, the officers receive their updated training, their CPR, the defibrillator, and so we have to maintain that certification every year. And as mentioned, so those other additional tools that the law allows is for police departments to elect the use of AED, EpiPen, and naloxone. So those are additional to the first responder training. Now, each department, even including in our area, it varies. Many of them use AED, some of them don't. Almost all of them at this point use naloxone. And as you see in the list, only very few carry the EpiPen. So, we kind of look at it as it's an extension of that standard of care, especially when these are life-saving tools that, we've seen. You have all seen the statistics on our overdoses and how successful that has been in saving lives. And so it's very important for our level of care and for public safety.
Okay, thank you.
Brian?
Through you, Mark, I'm not sure if maybe Jim could help me. But similar to Andrew, those numbers that the chief shared were staggering. So thank you for all that you and your department do to save lives. It is appreciated. Why would we not change this salary schedule instead of keep adding stipends here, stipends there? Would it just make things a lot easier and cleaner?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, is that to me?
You or Jim?
Jim, I believe.
Okay, I'll take it first, and then Chief, jump in if I missed anything. So, like I said, kind of a couple weeks ago, Brian, no two contracts are equal, no two contract negotiations are equal every year. They're always different, and it really just depends on what's going on in the world around us. How willing is the union to settle? Where do they want to be? I believe President Murphy, he referenced Norfolk. During the negotiations, Norfolk was brought up a lot. They wanted to be brought up close to Norfolk, and it kind of really surprised myself and the deputy and the chief. But why is Norfolk is just the exception to the norm in the in the areas around us, and they one way or another they wanted to get a lot more than what they actually got. They started a lot higher than what we settled on, and I am always looking at what's the COLA. How's this going to impact us? This COLA that was negotiated is a 7% COLA over 3 years. If you factor in that 2%, I look at that 2% a little bit differently than you guys look at it. I look at it as, okay, I don't have to cover the night differential on that. Their education incentive isn't factored into that. There's some bonus of doing it the way we worded it. I always go in looking at, okay, what can we do for the life of this contract? And do I stick within 6, 7%, 8%? And pretty much these contracts that you're considering are within that frame, give or take a little bit. So it was just the way the negotiations worked out. I don't think I can really dig too far into, the specifics of the negotiation. Kevin might pull me back a little bit, but they asked for more upfront than what they received. But at the end of the day, we left the table. Usually we shake hands, but this was after COVID, and we were pleased with the way we ended things. So, Chief, did I miss anything?
No, and to that point, I know it was brought up last week as well that we all understand that we're in difficult times right now. A lot of people are struggling. We're still in the middle of this pandemic. Hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel, but we're still involved in this right now. It's affected a lot of people, and that was all part of the negotiation. And again, I have to commend the union for accepting that and understanding that, and that's why you see a 1.5 in year one and the bigger increases at the end of the contract, because we were looking at it together as it's a little bit of an increase in the beginning, but hopefully things will start to recover after that. I mean, the economy was doing very well leading up to the COVID, so hopefully as this thing if we get through this thing, we'll recover quickly, and that was the thought process as we were negotiating.
I guess I maybe didn't state the question clearly. Why is it not built into their regular pay versus a stipend? That's the question.
I think Jim kind of addressed that, is that if you put it in their pay, then it gets the shift differential added on top of it. It qualifies for the overtime. But by listing it as a stipend, it's a percentage of base pay, and that extra 2% pay does not get overtime added, does not get the 4.5% shift differential added to it. So it reduces the exposure as a stipend as to what else can be escalated.
You're 100% correct. That's the reason why, Brian. I'm sorry if I didn't say that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because based on the chart of other towns, they clearly go above and beyond of what they're getting paid now. So it just is the stipend thing, I think, is the sticking point. The wording of stipend, not what they're getting paid.
Well, I think the other thing at town meeting, if you went in and said year 3 of our contract is going to be 5%, you're going to raise a lot of eyebrows also. So I think the stipend route, where it actually eliminates some of those extra add-ons, is a safer approach and does actually limit our exposure on some of those other categories of our budget in the way of overtime and shift differential.
And Mark, just on that note, remember, it isn't a full then 2% because of that overtime and shift differential. So even though it's 2% of the base, but not, it's not a net 2% because of everything else that it would be if it was just in the actual base rate.
Right.
And just, Brian, to your point, I understand the word stipend carries a stigma, and maybe if I had called it an allowance or something like that, lesson learned on that. I can't really go back and open up the contract, but I understand.
Thank you.
Other questions on Article 3? I saw
Doug had a question.
I got Ali first, then Susan, and if the third person could just put something in the chat, I'll catch up with you.
Thank you, Mark. We spoke on this last time, and again, when we spoke, it was talking about unions in this time and discussing these these contracts can be difficult because of the financial uncertainty of the future. As a professional who's trained in all these areas, I can appreciate having access to these emergency tools is very important. And I think it will be great if our police officers are also carrying EpiPen. As a mom who has children with prescribed EpiPens as well, it's not only hopefully here in the state of Massachusetts that towns will start carrying EpiPens, it's also nationwide a trend that is starting to change. So
quiet.
If you watch some of the national allergy awareness groups, it's across the nation that states are trying to get EpiPens more available to our first responders in our school systems. Stipend, it was difficult last time, having the information and the numbers in the other towns as a comparison, it makes a little more sense now. So thank you.
Susan?
Yeah, so mine is actually not a question. I was going to move for favorable action on the police contract. And also just a comment about contracts in general, because this is not the only one we're looking at tonight. I know from many years of negotiations that it's very difficult to explain after the fact why a particular agreement on, in a clause, the parties agreed to it. Well, what we will never get to see is the proposals that the union made and they didn't get. And so the very nature of negotiations is that neither side gets everything that they want, but each side necessarily gets some of what they want. And so I think I don't have a problem with all of this discussion and debate. I think it's very helpful because we're all learning more about what went into the process. But at the end of the day, I just think it's really important to understand that it's like trying to pull apart, a fabric. You can't do it. It's all tied up together, and it's easy to look at a clause and say, why would you ever agree to that? But you don't know what went into it and what we got as a function of agreeing to that particular item. I'm happy with the contract. I'm very pleased with the performance of our police department, and I would just at this point like to I don't want to cut off discussion, but I do want to move favorable action.
So let me go to Doug first and then come back to you. Hang on. I'm going to come back to you for your motion because you actually talked to the article first, and then I'm going to come back to you as soon as Doug gets done so you can make your motion.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Doug, you're up.
Thank you. I guess Brian answered my question or asked the question about the stipend versus the base salary. To me, my concern is that this stipend is going to lead, it's going to set a precedent for other groups to come in and bargain for this same type of thing. I don't think school nurses, who might be a different category, that get this type of stipend, I think that, this would open the door to other groups, librarians, lunch people, all asking for this in their collective bargaining agreements. And that is a financial consideration that weighs heavy on me. And the other thing that's been mentioned here is the idea of total compensation. And when I look at the 2019 town report and I see some of the salaries that the officers are making compared to stipends, which exceed their base pay, it really raises some questions in my mind. And it makes it hard to, even though it's 2% and even though the officers deserve this, when I see stipends already exceeding the base salaries, it's kind of a hard thing for me to swallow. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Okay. Back to Susan.
Yeah, so just to add on, though, to what was just said, as I think Attorney Feely said earlier on, each contract, and Jim did as well, there is no precedent. Just because something is in one contract doesn't entitle another group to that item. When the parties sit down, they sit down with the contract they have, and they work from that point. And each group is different. They have different needs, different demands, and there is no entitlement. It may be an argument that you'd make, well, they got a stipend, we'd like one too, but there's no precedent setting one contract to another. I just think that's a point of information. In any event, I would move favorable action on Article 3 for the police contract.
I'll second it.
Okay, and that motion includes a dollar amount of $57,600. So moved and seconded. And I'm actually going to use this as our attendance roll call because I forgot to do that at the beginning of the meeting. So we have a motion and seconded. Denny?
Yes.
Good. Josette?
Yes.
Ally?
Yes.
Andrew?
No.
Susan?
Yes.
Lisa?
No.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Doug?
No.
Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And myself, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 3, 0. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, members of the police department.
Thank you, everybody.
Article 4, Fire Department.
Mark, before you go there, could you designate who the no's were other than Andrew?
It was Andrew, Lisa, and Doug.
Thank you.
Okay. Chief Bailey, do you want to make some comments before we talk about your contract?
I'm all set, Mark. I don't have anything to add at this time.
Okay. Ready? Questions on firefighters? I'm trying to find my note.
Andrew's got a question.
Andrew's got a question? Okay. Andrew?
Yeah, I don't mean to continue to be the stipend scourge guy. We didn't really get a chance to fully we did get a chance to fully debate the last police contract, but I just want to repeat what I said earlier. To me, the cumulative amount of pay is not an issue for the firefighters. And again, I wasn't just going to pick on the police here. The firefighters, I believe, have negotiated 2.5. So, a little different than the police schedule. So I'm just trying to pay special attention to the stipend. So under Article 17, Section 6, Article 17 of the fire contract, I'm just looking at what Jim sent us in terms of the changes, not the full 100 and something page document, but just the changes. I see that, to the best of my knowledge, there are stipend, there are increases in the what the stipend percentage is for the fire department, not new stipends. So that's my question. That's my first question. Am I reading this correctly, that we're not introducing new stipends? We're just under the stipend section, increasing the certified EMT stipend and adjusting it for different steps, increasing the percentage of that stipend.
If I could answer that, Mark?
Yep. Go ahead, Jim.
We're actually increasing them by, there's two of them, separate ones, by 2%. Not everybody gets each one. I'm sure the chief can speak to that. Depends on what certification. And I think more or less, this is why we settled on the 2% for the police, because you like to have parity whenever possible between police and fire and all the other unions. And I think eventually, in the end, they saw that the fire gets 2% for their stipends. That's where the 2% came from.
Yeah, and just real quick, I just noticed in here, once again, that goes back to base pay, so that does not include any shift differential or anything else, correct?
Chief, I'll let you answer that one. I don't believe it does, but I want to have the chief confirm.
We don't have any shift or night differential.
Oh, because they're a 24. Got it.
That's correct.
All right.
So that was my first question. That I understand that we have the EMT stipend that was at 11%, moving up 2 percentage points to 13%, and then the certified emergency medical technician stipend from 7% up 2 percentage points to 9%. So it's not that we're introducing new stipends. We're just topping off what's already there. So to my second question is, how many firefighters in the department get those stipends currently?
Everyone. We have 11 EMTs and 29 paramedics.
So just to piggyback on, like, you can't double dip on that. You're one or the other. That's why there's a difference in the numbers.
That's correct.
So an EMT gets the 9% and the paramedic gets the 13.
That's correct.
Okay.
And we also added language in there that for the officers, they're topped out at top step firefighter.
First level firefighter.
So that they're not getting it at their rate, correct?
Yep. Okay.
Great. And just last question on this. It goes into effect immediately, right? So it's for the fiscal year 2021 that your base pay, if you were an EMT and you were counting on an 11% stipend for that, it's starting now. It's a 13% in every year going forward. I'm not making the point that it's 2% every year. I get that it's just a one-time level shift, but I just want to, just timing is my question. It starts now, right?
It starts, it'll be retroactive. It starts
retroactive to July 1st.
So when these contracts all go through, our finance department will work with the chiefs and the department heads and their administrative assistants to calculate. It's a whole process to calculate with Maryland staff the retro pay there. But yes, Andrew.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Actually, Andrew got to my questions also about the stipends. Any other questions on fire?
Mark Sullivan.
Yes, Mark.
So I just was listening to the chief. 29 paramedics, 11 EMTs. I'm just wondering, do we need 29 paramedics? In other words, and I'm not questioning. I appreciate their expertise, but when you look at the salary structures, should everyone be a paramedic so that everyone's getting paid at that highest rate, or should we be looking at staffing to say we need so many of this type of person, so many of this? Don't we just, by everyone being a paramedic, and I understand it's great to have 29 paramedics, but is it the most efficient salary structure?
I'll let the chief answer that.
So given the fact that our staffing is so low, the need for the paramedics is great because they rotate off of the ambulance every 2 weeks and they ride the engine for a week. So we don't have the staffing to do it otherwise. And you also have the added benefit of having the medics on the truck. Pretty much anything that you get from us is going to have a medic on it, even if it's not an ambulance. So it gives us much more versatility, especially right now during COVID, where we're running out of 2 stations. That flexibility is very much needed, to the point where I had to ask the board to increase by 1 to operate Station 2. So we've been on that premise since March, and we currently are still operating at that.
Chief, isn't it also that to support advanced life support services, you need 2 paramedics on the vehicle?
So in order to run at the ALS level, we need to have 2 paramedics on the truck, or we can run 1 paramedic and 1 basic, which is called PB. But in order to do that, I have to have other paramedics available for all priority 1 calls. So we try to staff with 2 paramedics on each truck every day.
Is there a requirement on the EMTs to continue their education, or is just the financial incentive the only driver?
So both certifications, they vary greatly in their level of training, but the requirement for recertification is very similar. It's on a 2-year cycle that we have to recert. So 1 year we recertify the EMTs, and the following year we recertify the paramedics. All of our licenses are on a 2-year cycle.
Right, but are the EMTs required to move up to paramedics, or is the financial incentive the only motivator to get them to move up to the next level?
No, the current process is that the EMTs that we have are those that were on the department prior to moving to ALS in 2003.
Okay.
Everyone since 2003 that we've hired has either been a paramedic or is an EMT. It has to be a paramedic within 2 years. We currently have 3 of those individuals that are EMTs that are on that EMT list that are in their training right now for paramedics. So when they finish that, they will too become paramedics.
So the other 11 were grandfathered in under the old rules.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So we are moving toward 100%.
Mark,
Yep. Go ahead, Mark.
yes. So Mark, I have a follow-up question. And I'm just curious, have the stipends ever worked, let's say in reverse? In other words, and I'm not just going with the police or with the fire, but have we had responsibilities that they no longer need to do, whether technology's taken it over or something else, so that now your responsibilities aren't as great, therefore there should be a reduction in stipend or a decrease in salary?
The answer to that is no. If anything, our responsibilities have increased. Our workload has increased with both call volume and the nature of the volume, the calls that we deal with. We deal with just about any type of medical call you can imagine, in the house setting, out in the street. It's what we do. We're an all hazard agency, so we deal with everything.
Mark, just to get to your point, within the police stipend that we basically just approved, if the state comes back and says first responder care now must be proficient in, AEDs, EpiPens, and Narcan and various things, and that becomes part of the standard, then I think there's an opportunity to come back and says, that's now the standard, so your base pay covers the standard, and you no longer negotiate a stipend for that because it's part of first responder care now. It's not us going over and above standard care, first responder care. So there's an opportunity for that to happen if the state changes the guidelines for first responder.
Right. Thanks, Mark. That's what I was trying to get at a bit when I asked Chief Carmichael about the training at the academy. If this now becomes standard training, then does it really warrant the stipend? And I'm not talking about the fireman stipend in this particular case, but just in general, when does an add-on now become standard practice? And again, I would imagine salaries will have to change to reflect that now it's a standard practice and no longer needs to be a stipend. I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Mark, the only other thing I would add to that is that it's part of our collective bargaining agreement that everyone has to become that comes on the job has to become a medic. So
yeah,
that would have to be bargained out.
Right. Yep. Okay. Other questions? Denny, you have a motion, I believe?
Yeah, put forward a motion for favorable action I don't have the amount in front of me, Mark. Do you have?
99,700.
Second.
Is that correct, Jim? 99.7?
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay. I made notes early and I couldn't quite read my writing. Okay, seconded by Brian. All right, we have a motion for favorable action on the firefighters contract. Denny,
Yes.
Josette,
Yes.
Allie,
Yes.
Andrew,
No.
Susan,
Yes.
Lisa.
Are computers restarting?
Okay, we'll come back. Kathleen,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
myself as a yes, and Lisa is not back yet. We will list her as abstained. So we have 12-1-1.
Mark, when she comes on, do we take her vote or what's this? What are the Zoom COVID rules for voting?
Just to jump in on that, I know in the past we've had a couple people jump on and jump off a meeting. We've just left it as is.
Leave it as not voting,
As abstaining, that's fine.
abstaining.
Can we wait and give her a minute or two? I mean, she has sat in on the debate. I know we have other business.
Yeah, well, we can start, we have other business. What we'll do is we'll start the other business, and when we come back after the next article, we'll ask her for her vote on 14. Sorry, 4, number 4. I'm not sure how quickly she'll get back on here. Number 5, DPW. Jim, are you covering DPW, or do you have?
I'll cover it. It's pretty straightforward. I know you guys have everything. It's for first year impact is $30,000. It's pretty much straight COLAs in there. They negotiate a little bit for reimbursement for I think their license certification, $75. I know you guys have all the contracts, but it's the ASME contracts for the clerical and for the DPW, their living adjustments with the same. I would note that I cited the general fund money there. We actually budgeted the water increase for clerical and for DPW as part of their rate setting. So that is the general fund appropriation. The water money and sewer money is already in their budgets.
Okay, it's already in their budgets. Got it. Okay.
So I'll take any questions.
Yeah, well, actually, that raises a technical question. When we voted the budgets for sewer and water, we didn't necessarily approve the contract.
Actually wasn't completed. So I had an idea it was going to be around 2%. We had agreed to that before COVID, and I wanted it built into their rates so we didn't have to go back and adjust their rates. So it's based upon.
Okay, so they will turn that money back over to the town as opposed to defaulting it to free cash or retained earnings if it doesn't go through. Okay. Article 5 DPW questions. I don't see any hands jumping up. Andrew?
Well, I was going to make a motion for favorable action, but I see Lisa has just joined us. Hey, Lisa, yes, I'll let Mark handle it.
Yeah. So on Article 4, we had a motion for favorable action and seconded. Since you were not here, we abstained for you, but you can place your vote now.
Mark, abstention is fine since I missed some of the debate. And I'm sorry, my computer decided it was time to restart. I thought I had canceled all that, but it just was like, whoop, I'm out.
Okay. All right. No other questions, Andrew?
I was going to make a motion for favorable action on the DPW contract, Article 5.
Okay. It's seconded by Denny. And the funding is $30,000. We have a motion and seconded. Yes. Denny?
Yes.
Allie?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Lisa?
Abstain.
Okay. Kathleen?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And myself, yes. 1301. Okay. Article 6, clerical.
So Mark, just that's basically all the clerks here in Town Hall.
Yeah.
Covers about 19 people. And again, they're an ASME union. They settled on a 1.5 to 275. Pretty straightforward on that one. I'll take any questions you have.
I'm trying to find my schedule. They had a couple of questions. I'm not so concerned about the cost of living increases. I was more concerned about the actual pay levels that they're getting up to. I'm just trying to track it down here now. There we go. Dispatchers, before dispatchers. Okay, so so I see that we've got 5 classifications: customer service rep, staff assistant, payroll assistant / purchasing assistant, senior staff assistant, and assistant town clerk. Yeah, my concern is I'm just trying to get a handle on job responsibilities and correlate it back to what I've seen for pay scales of private sector positions. Jim, if you can just give me a little update on, other than the assistant clerk, basically the job descriptions of the other 4 classes.
I'll give you the job descriptions of each class if you'd like it, Mark, but basically I can kind of run you through, you know, when you run into town hall, kind of what's a C1?
Yeah.
Like a C1, there's a two C1s in Marilyn's office. They're mostly the people who may come to the window and assist you. There's a C1 in the Board of Health office. That's Jen Norton. She'll help you, greet you at the desk. Peggy's also a C1. She's the person who sits at the front of the clerk's office, just more or less get everything done that you need them to get done. Okay. Someone who may be, the clerk's on her own at a C5, the assistant clerk's on her own at a C5, that speaks for itself.
Yep.
C4 is someone like Kelly, who's now assisting with Finance Committee, but she's our purchasing assistant for Patrick and myself. She's our number 1 person that we go to. She helps us with the procurement. There involves a level of taking some of the classes at the state level. Before that, it was Sue Beatty. So there's some real fine knowledge you need to know there. I believe Cheryl Pember, who assists Dawn Anderson, and now Carl in engineering, she's a C4, and it really gets into some expertise and technical experience there as you get up in the Cs. Marilyn is, what's her name? Is Joy a C3?
I think she's above a C3.
Okay, Joy works in Marilyn's office. She's the sole person handling all the payroll for the town. So it's differing job descriptions across the board. C2 is the other person in Marilyn's office who kind of assist and help to not oversee the office, but more of the senior staff in Marilyn's office and back there. Dennis has a C1, a C3, and a C2 and C3. So it's more of like your level of experience, and you don't automatically get to a C3 because you've been here for 20 years. It takes some expertise as you work your way up there.
So I'm just trying to visualize.
Responsibility is higher.
What's that, Marilyn?
With responsibility. Jody, did I miss anything? I see you raising your hand.
Well, I believe it's the C4s that also assist in the accounts payable invoicing. They're the ones who are receiving the invoices and coding for accounts payable.
Yeah, because I was looking at the non-salary scale and I didn't see any accounting functions being covered at that lower level. So I was just trying to figure out where they also fit into the process. Okay.
Can I answer that? So,
sure, yeah.
So we have accounts payable clerk, and she's non-union, and okay. The assistant town accountant is also non-union.
Yeah, I found that one on the pay scale. I didn't see the payables clerk.
Okay.
I was looking through the schedule. Okay. Alrighty. Thank you. Other questions on clerical? Yes, Jeff.
Through you, Mark, how many clerical workers does this contract cover?
I believe it's 19 in total.
Can you just help me with something? If you look at like a C1 who's been here, you know, a considerable amount of time, and a C4, maybe entry level, you know, your C4, more responsibility, you know, maybe higher education, makes less than, you know, somebody with less responsibility and just longevity. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, that's a possibility.
I'm sorry, Jeff. I was checking my list. I have a seniority list here. It's 16 people in that union. I apologize. Your question was in regards to...
It's more of a comment. I'll stand down on it.
Well, basically, if you got a C1 at step 15, they're making more than your C3 who's been around for 8 years, and even a step 9 for that fact. for C3. So it was just, does that still make sense as somebody who's been here 15 years versus somebody who's got a higher skill level for half the time?
Well, I can say, Mark, it has to do a lot the ability. It's not just if you've been here 15 or 20 years, because we've had a couple of them, that's been here since someone who's been here since 04. They've been a C1 the whole time since during their tenure. The way it usually works out is, okay, you start off in the clerk's office or in the water department office as a C1, a C4 or something, or 2 or 3 may retire. You kind of work your way up the ladder, but if you're not qualified for it, you don't. And we either go to other people with less seniority or we go out to find qualified people. We've done that a few times in the last year.
So it's not the norm to have somebody at a step 15 and
well, it depends. There's like just this week we interviewed two people for 2 vacancies in the water department. We had a retirement up there, and then someone left due to COVID. So that's way out of the norm. That never happens that we interview 2 people for 2 positions. So it's just a given year that we're in.
And so for 19 people, first year funding is only $10,500.
As I said, it's 16, and 1, 2, 3. 3 of those people are in the water sewer division, which it was already factored in there.
Okay.
Somebody make the motion.
Okay, did I see another hand though? Andrew?
Here he is.
Yeah, favorable action on the clerical workers contract, Article 6.
Took it away from Jeff. Jeff's got the second. Andrew, motion. Jeff, second. And for 10,500. Alrighty. Denny.
Yes.
Josette.
Yes.
Allie.
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
Lisa.
Yes.
Kathleen.
Yes.
Ryan.
Abstain.
Abstain. Lucy.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
And I also am going to abstain. 12-0-1. Sorry, 12-0-2.
Yeah.
So abstains by Brian and myself. All right, ready? Article 7, dispatchers. This is their second contract, correct, Jim?
Yes, this is their second contract. They were a new union just about 2 years ago. So they only had 2 years worth of a contract. The reason it was a 3-year contract, it was retroactive. We gave them a 0 in the first year last time around because they had notified us they weren't part of the personnel salary schedule. So it was really a unique situation. I've never dealt with a union forming during my tenure, so it was a learning curve for us. But for the most part, there is a stipend in there, and I'll be upfront with that. Their current contract allows for a stipend. It did when they transitioned over to a union. They had asked for $1,000 for each member to be allowed to recognize their public safety combined dispatch requirements there. And I think the chief's gotten off. I think Paul and Tim might still be on, but there's only a handful of people there. I think it's 10 or, oh, there you are, Chief. So they asked for their stipend to remain. I agreed to it, and so did the chief, with the caveat that, okay, we want to recognize this EpiPen and Narcan situation again and make sure that it's a catch-all. So we left similar language in there. Chief or Deputy Kelleher, did I miss anything? John?
No, just to reiterate just that important standard of care. Our police dispatchers, police and fire, they're not combined dispatch, so they're police and fire. And they are the primary public safety answering point for all 911 calls. And just in the past year and a half, they have also taken on Text 911 and cell phone 911. So Walpole is now geofenced, and so they're taking in a significant amount of calls. And when we're talking about AED and EpiPen and Narcan, they're that voice that's on the other end of the phone that's giving instructions. So we feel that it's very important for that standard of care. That's where it's starting, and that there's such an important part of that chain of events that takes place.
So Chief, real quick, when you mentioned that first point of response, so they have the training. So if there is a defibrillator at the senior center and nobody knows how to use it and they call 911, they can walk somebody through the use of it?
That's correct. So years ago, we went to what's called emergency medical dispatch. And so they have to be trained and certified in that standard of care. So you're right. When somebody calls, whether it's an overdose or whatever it might be, a heart attack, they are the ones that will provide instruction to that person to help perform, life-saving techniques that, come into play to at least stabilize that person until the first responders arrive on scene.
So do they rise to the same level as your first responder training, or are they kind of semi-trained in first responder?
They're semi-trained. They're trained in emergency medical dispatch. So depending on what the nature of the call is, that's the type of instruction that they're gonna perform and that they're gonna instruct that person to do on the other end of the phone. Some of them are first responder trained as well, but their standard is emergency medical dispatch.
Okay.
Mark, just to add, I just counted, there's 10 personnel covered by this contract.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Brian, Denny, and I think Jeff had his hand up too.
Through you, Mark, to the chief. Chief, do they have to get recertified or do they get retrained every few years? How does that work with dispatchers?
Yes, they do. They have to recertify every year. They have to go to continuing education. We do that. We actually get that all through the 911 grant. So part of us accepting the responsibility of keeping the PSAPs, the public safety answering points, here in Walpole at the Walpole Police Department, the state reimburses us for their training and for their salary when they go to that training. So they do have to continuously maintain that.
Thank you.
We didn't have a second. Yeah, Brian and Jeff. Is that it? Or Denny and Jeff?
It was Denny. I was going to put forward a motion. If we have more conversation, hold off.
Let's hold off. Okay. Then Jeff and then
Andrew.
Yeah, just a couple questions through you, Mark. You said there were 10 dispatchers covered by this?
Correct.
And how many of those are first responder trained?
First responder trained, there's only 2 or 3 of them and that's not because they're dispatchers, that's because they are special police officers in other communities. So
okay.
they have other levels of training and have been through the intermittent police academy. But all of our dispatchers are trained in emergency medical dispatch.
Just to kind of lay out what my thinking was on support of the police contract is, I looked at that first responder training as really the basis for entitlement of the stipend, not necessarily whether it be AED, defibrillators, what have you, really that level of training that they have, they're required to carry, just as our firefighters are eligible for a stipend relative to EMT or paramedic training. In this case, we're offering a stipend to somebody not necessarily medically trained to administer or walk somebody through administering what we're asking them to, and that's outlined in the contract.
Do you want me to reply to that?
Yeah, I mean, if there is a response to give, but that's...
No, you're right. So the first responders, the police officers on the street are the actual ones that have to, go out there and administer things. There's times when people come into the police station, though, as well, where the dispatchers have to initiate themselves. We have other times where, believe it or not, our dispatchers are responsible for checking prisoners. We have to check whenever there's a prisoner in the cell. Our dispatchers have to go in there and they have to check on them every half an hour. We've had times when our dispatchers have had to go out back when, in the old station when, somebody was suicidal and they had to actually act on things like that. So there are possible times when they may have to initiate, physically and take care of situations. Doesn't happen as often, obviously, as when we respond to calls, but we look at it as they are that first level of care. They're the first person that's going to start to stabilize that certain situation. And we think that it's important that they also understand the EpiPen and DFib and the naloxone. And as far as naloxone, them having the ability to understand how to administer that, they have a lot of our overdoses. They are telling people, because bystanders many times have access to naloxone, they are having people sometimes give that first dose of Narcan to somebody that's having an overdose.
Thank you, Chief. So we're saying that they may not have, most of these folks don't have first responder training, but they are trained in these tools.
They are trained in how to, they're trained on how to administer it. But if, we do have DFibs in the station and everything. So if somebody were to have a situation, they could assist with that, yes. But they're not first responders. We have a couple, like I said, that are special police officers, intimate police officers in other towns.
Let's see, Andrew?
You can skip me. I'm not going to repeat myself.
Okay. Then Denny.
I see Mark Sullivan put his hand up, so.
Oh, okay, yes, Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Mike?
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I'm struggling with the stipend again. So the dispatcher is located in the police station, sitting near or with police officers that are receiving a 2% stipend because they're first responders and trained in doing all this. So if a call comes in and it's an emergency, I'm imagining there's a police officer there who's actually gone out and done this that should be able to handle the call. I just don't see, they're a dispatcher, they handle calls. Someone calls in, I need to know how to do this. You take down the manual, step one, do this. I just don't see where this activity warrants a stipend. That's just my own feeling on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Any?
I'll put forward a motion for favorable action. And again, Mark, I don't have the.
Dispatchers is 21,000.
Thank you.
Okay, motion by Denny.
Second.
Second by Susan. You ready? Denny?
Yes.
Josette?
No.
Allie?
Yes.
Andrew?
No.
Susan?
Yes.
Lisa?
No.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Doug?
No.
Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Myself? No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 6. Motion carries. The no's were Josette, Andrew, Lisa, Mark, Doug, and myself. And just for the record, I'm assuming the no's were because of the stipend?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay,
For me.
alrighty. Article 8, library employees. And this one is first year funding of $5,500.
So Mark, just a brief overview. This one's pretty straightforward. We agreed to a 222 with the, just verify that, Yeah, 222 with the library union. That's all I'm gonna say about that. I'll take any questions.
Was there changes in their schedule to meet the state requirements now that we're over 25,000 in population?
Sal's already made that change. That there was already language in the contract that recognized that.
Okay, so that was mostly just adjusting some of the shifts, right, to get the hour coverage?
Yes.
Okay. Alrighty. Any questions on library? No? Okay, Denny?
Motion for.
I see Jeff has his hand up.
Oh, Jeff?
Just quick point of clarification, the additional 50% bullet point for healthcare contribution, that's a new item, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that one. So, yeah, so they will actually go to a higher employee contribution for all new hires.
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, Denny was making a motion.
Second.
And Susan seconded. Andrew, did you have a question, comment?
No, I was just gonna second or make the motion.
Okay. All right, so moved and seconded for 5,500. Favorable action. Denny?
Yes.
Josette?
Yes.
Ally?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, 1400. Number 9, non-union salary and hourly schedules. There was an issue raised this morning with regards to children of any finance committee member that may be working for Park and Rec or as lifeguards or so forth. And Dan Bruce came back saying this would be a conflict of interest if you were to vote on this because it personally affects a family member. So if you fall into that category, please refrain from debating and please abstain in the vote. I know we have at least one. Okay.
Oh, from debating?
Yes, because you could be influencing others to the benefit of your child or spouse.
So what is the extent of that? My daughter worked 3 shifts last summer. So should I keep my mouth shut?
Is she currently employed by the town? Or seeking employment back to the town? I don't think so.
At the moment, no.
Okay.
I'm sure she would love it in the future, but
yeah, if she's
at the
not
moment,
currently
no.
employed. Yeah, if she wasn't currently employed this summer or planning to be carried forward, then yeah.
Just a point. I mean, we've had other members that have abstained on votes. We're not necessarily quite sure completely why, but they've taken part in debate.
You mean talking about tonight?
I'm talking about tonight. I'm talking about previous articles over the last 2 weeks.
There's a difference between abstaining because of a conflict of interest and abstaining for another reason. So that's why with the conflict of interest, there's a clear rule.
During previous votes where there was an abstention, are people required to
disclose the reasoning?
Whether or not it's because of a conflict of interest or because they just don't feel like voting?
They are. If it was a conflict of interest, they're required to disclose it. But in the case of myself abstaining on Article 6 was once again, it was a case of, I understand that it's a viable contract, but I had some questions and it's like, I did not want to say no, but I wasn't that confident that I wanted to be yes on it either, because, you know, I've seen private sector pay scales and I was just trying to get my head around, you know, these people are, you know, going to be getting a guaranteed pension. People in the private sector are making less per hour, and they're capped at their growth potential for salaries. And that was the reason for my abstention on 6. People abstain for a variety of reasons, but if it's a conflict of interest, they're supposed to disclose it.
Right.
Marilyn, did you have something you wanted to say? Marilyn? Do you have a comment on conflict of interest? No, okay. Any questions or comments on non-union salary scale? It's a 1-year duration for the current fiscal year. And Jim, this would also be retroactive to the July 1st?
As we've done in the past, it would become effective July 1st. So we've done this once or twice that I can think of.
Okay. Any funding in this tied back to sewer and water?
No. Yeah, again, going into this, I had a feeling it was going to be 2%. So I asked Rick and Bernie and Bill Abbott to factor in the 2% in there. We built that into the rate. So it's all general fund money.
No, I meant there are people that are actually in the sewer and water.
Yeah, but they haven't gotten theirs.
Right.
The salary schedule has to be voted in to take effect.
Right, but once again, part of this increase, not the dollar amount here, but part of it is already in sewer and water's budget.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this one is for $87,090.
Yes.
For the current
Personnel board. Mike McGrath actually tried to be on here. He's a medical situation, so they voted for 1-0. There was actually they met 2 or 3 times to consider this matter because they wanted clarification initially on combining everything, but they voted favorable action.
Okay. Other questions or comments on Article 9? There being none, Andrew?
I'm just going to motion for favorable action on Article 9.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Josette? Okay. So the motion is for $87,090. Doug? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Doug?
No question.
No, I'm taking the vote.
Oh, yeah.
Steve?
I'm abstaining. Conflict of interest.
Okay. Jeff?
Conflict.
Mark?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Ally?
Yes.
Josette?
Yes.
Doug? Sorry, Denny?
I'll abstain just to be safe
Okay.
that 1 week.
And a yes. So
And no conflicts.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11. 1103.
And Mark, if you don't mind, I know I still got a couple of board members on. Nancy's on mute, but Jim and Mark are here too.
Okay.
Just a lot of work went into this, and I don't know if either one of the board members on the call want to make any statements, but I'm appreciative of the work that they put in. Your vote tonight and the discussion. Get the message loud and clear for future negotiations. Don't go near the stipends. Message received. Mark, Jim, do you guys have anything to add?
I would just say, I served on the FinCom for 6 years and really appreciate how you're digging into all the issues to try to really understand them before you vote. I really appreciate that as a select board member because I remember my days on FinCom. So thanks for all your hard work. I know a lot of effort goes into the year and just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll just say similarly that I'm impressed with the level of debate here and the thoughtfulness of the debate. And so I appreciate that.
Also appreciate the support ultimately for these contracts. It's obviously important for us to get these behind us. And I think Jim and the negotiating team did a really good job across the board on these. I understand there's some concerns over stipends, and as Jim says, we'll keep that in mind going forward. But these are important contracts to get behind us. So thanks for the support on that.
Thanks, Jim. And Nancy?
You're muted.
Nancy, do you have a couple comments, or are you all set?
I think she's.
No, I just wanted to agree with Jim O'Neill, and I couldn't get my mic on mic.
Yep. Jeff?
I just had a comment is, the last thing we want to do is not vote favorably on a contract, especially after all the effort that's been put into it. But, when it comes to us, it's almost 11th hour. Is there any way to bring that forward, bring us closer to where we are in the negotiation process in the future?
Actually, I'll look at Susan and ask for her advice, because she's been around a long time and this has come up before.
And I'm not talking about just this. I'm talking even in the budget planning process. I mean, we're handed a budget that's already been devised. I really think we should be closer to the planning and the negotiations.
So, Susan, do you have any comments about the planning and negotiations?
Well, I would just say this about negotiations. They're complicated, and they're very, as Jim said, each contract is so individual to the circumstances, to the jobs they're doing, and to the personalities, frankly, of the unions and their leadership. It's easy to second guess, but short of having the finance committee sitting in a gallery sort of like cheering on our side, I'm not sure how you would get, as you say, Jeff, closer to it. Each side has a team that goes in, and the team members have to be clothed with the authority to reach an agreement. Otherwise, it's not good faith bargaining. So you can't have a situation where Jim is running out of the room to phone us up. That's just not how it works. What we can do, and anybody can do this, and certainly FinCom can do it, is if there are things in the contract that you like or don't like, feel free to let Jim and or the Board of Selectmen know prior to negotiations beginning. I really would like to see less of this, more of that, or why don't we try to get this next time round? But at the end of the day, the team goes in and they have to be clothed with the authority to reach agreement.
So I agree with that. I don't want to sit in a room with Jim Johnson negotiating the contract at all. But to your point, 3 years from now or 2.5 years from now, when we know we need to go into negotiations, that's where we're going in front of Jim with where we think the contracts should land, where we think they should be from, a percentage increase or stipend, or how they should be restructured because we don't like the term stipend, whatever it might be. So Jim's got our direction, or at least our thoughts and commentary going into.
I'll just add, having been around a while, and Susan, this does come up every time, the same comment.
By the new guy?
Yeah, and we do. Jim's actually good on does bring it up and gives seeks the guidance before going in. The stipend one is a new one. Then I will. The one question I have is if we went through these last spring when the economy was flowing pre-COVID, and a lot of these things just didn't seem to be the same issue when they were actually negotiated. The economy in the world has changed dramatically from when these were negotiated to now when we're voting. So it's something that we all should also keep in mind through the process.
Yeah, the other thing too is if he briefs the finance committee on the direction they're taking, we would need to move to executive session, because we don't want on the public record the stance of town administration and the Board of Selectmen out there, so that everybody in the world knows what we're trying to get to. So we would have to turn off the mics, turn off the cameras, have a separate set of minutes based on an executive session for whatever Jim briefs us on. But if Jim comes to us and says, we're heading into the next cycle, and he says, well, we want to make sure that we're not maxing 2.5% across the board on any of the contracts because, you know, we don't want we're trying to look at real estate taxes and hold them lower or whatever other reasons we need the money. If you go by 2% and 1.5%, we can add the additional firefighter. We can add 2 more DPW guys. That kind of thing is we're looking for other priorities in town. How do you financially reach them? That's the kind of guidance we can give so that when he goes to the negotiation table, he says, I've got a dollar pool I can work with because I still want to add 2 more members to your union, 2 more members to your union, and whatever else. He can walk in with that kind of ammunition. So, yes, Nancy.
I just wanted to add that having been in this budget process for 20 years, about 12 years ago, the word stipend was a hot topic for a cycle, and then it was gone again. I think Dennis has a great point that, in the spring, we were in a totally different economy. But I think a great idea would maybe be, as Jeff mentioned, maybe in 2 years from now, about a half a year before we start this cycle again for negotiating contracts, maybe there is a sit down with whatever the existing FinCom looks like, and between the Board of Selectmen, Jim, and the FinCom, and talk about what you didn't talk about, the expectations before those negotiations start to happen. Because there was also a few questions that was brought up by the FinCom that are policy decisions that come from the Board of Selectmen, that I understand your financial considerations and your reasons for them, but the personal safety of the town and the direction that we want to go in as far as that goes, it unfortunately has a dollar amount, but it's a dollar amount that keeps residents in our town safe. And at the end of the day, their safety, their ability to get the best medical care, the best safety available to them is things that we want to bring to the table. And as you all know, none of us work for free, except for when we're here volunteering. So that being said, but I love the idea that 2 years from now, we sit down and maybe kind of have some of these discussions that shouldn't have to happen in front of the union members. Sure. Because especially in a unprecedented time like right now, as the union president said, I know that you have the best intention questioning this, but for what they've been through and what they've seen and what they've gone to work to do, what they have had to see on TV as people talk about defunding them and things like that, it's gut hurting. It is so upsetting. The amount of death, sadness, and chaos that they've been through for the last 6 months and have gone to work every single day with a smile on their face, while so many people sit home safely as they should be and doing what we are asking them to do. It's not a conversation that, and I'm taking responsibility for it too. We should have done this, and we're trying to make the best we can with Zoom, but it's something that shouldn't have had to happen for them to have to deal with after going through what they went through and then negotiating in good faith. That's me. But in the end, we're all doing what we can. We're all volunteering. We're all trying to balance the health, safety, well-being, and financial status of the town. And, I think the end result is a good outcome right now. I just, the people that work every single day, it's hard to hear. So that's it. Sorry.
Thank you, Nancy. I got Josette, then Lisa.
I guess I just wanted to make a comment that I honestly and truly feel that Jim and his group of negotiators did all of this in good faith, and exactly as Denny said, at a time prior to COVID hitting. And then you had COVID hit, and 6 months later, we're looking at things a little bit differently because things have changed. And you're thinking of the different people that are still out there furloughed and the 60,000 pounds of food that were given out to people in this community that need it. So you're looking at things, we are all looking at things differently than what we would have looked at this in February. And it's not to micromanage what Jim has done, because Jim, you're outstanding. Town is very fortunate
Thank you.
to have you as our administrator, and your finance team is amazing. But I think the reality of where we have been in the past 6 months, again, referring back to what Denny and what Nancy have said, has definitely shown its head tonight. And we have been a little bit more critical than what we probably normally would have been. But stipends are something that I personally don't care for. To me, a stipend is something that one or two people, like an armorer or something like that, would get. Or if it was a dollar value as opposed to a percentage. Or like with the dispatchers, if the stipend was being paid for what they actually did, as opposed to prepaying them for a service that they may not do. I guess we're just a little bit more frustrated than what we were 6 months ago, and everybody does the best they can, and we all come from a good place. And hopefully this ends sooner than later, the situation we're in. So off my box.
Lisa, then Kathleen.
I like these contracts. I was quite touched by the good working relationship that was so obvious between our labor council and our town administrator and the police union president. I think those people have worked together and done a lot behind the scenes, as other people have said. And probably a lot of horse trading went on to get to a contract that is good. Not just the police contract, but that's the one that I was the most bothered by. Yes, there was a specific part of the police contract that I didn't like, but I would never expect to like every part of the contract, just as no other individual would. I just thought I was allowed to say, I don't like that part of it. In fact, it's my duty to say that, but I wouldn't expect that then we have to start negotiating all the contracts with our whole committee, or that even in the long run that the contract wouldn't go through. I simply feel that, as volunteers here, we should go ahead and say, I don't agree, but we're not expecting town meeting to then spend 6 hours making me happy or making any of us individually happy. It's enough just to say, this part bothers me. I don't know what happened behind the scenes. I respect the excellent work that the people involved did to make these contracts, but it's okay to have my own voice in a minor dissent, because that's why we're here. That's right.
Kathleen?
So my thumbs up was really a thumbs up for Jim and his team, but I have to agree with Lisa. I find the conversation a little bit disheartening that people feel bad that we sort of looked deep into some contracts. And, it's unfortunate that the police one got our attention. Of course, we're looking at all the contracts because that's the role that we signed up for. And if we didn't state where we have a problem with it, I think we would be doing the town a disservice. So I'm a little dismayed. I've been kind of quiet tonight. It's odd to me that the finance committee should be almost reprimanded for digging into the finances of the contract. It does not mean we don't support the good work that people are doing, but we have a unique position where we really have to look at the numbers. And I think that's what we did. And I think we came to a good conclusion, and I'm proud of the work that we did. Just as I'm proud of the people that we're voting on contracts for.
Okay, we have several more items to get to. I want to preface this next section as it relates to citizens petitions. There was some substantial correspondence between town council, Jim, myself, and some of the other RTMs, and also Dan Bruce, finance committee members, and Dan Bruce. The 2-year moratorium on a no action vote only applies to zoning articles. So we can vote any of the non-zoning articles, no action, and the petitioner can turn around, write it back up, and bring it back, next town meeting.
Yeah.
With that said, also any citizen's petition, once it gets the signature certified and added to the warrant, it cannot be withdrawn from the warrant. We need to act on those articles. And the petitioner can present his case to the moderator at town meeting and say, I wish to withdraw my article, and then it's up to the discretion of the moderator to withdraw the article, or based on our recommendation, if our recommendation is refer back to petitioner, he'll let it go forward to refer it back to the petitioner, and basically the petitioner gets what they asked for. Susan?
So with that, I would actually like to move for reconsideration of all 3 of those articles, and I would just ask whether you'd like me to do that one by one, or
actually, 27 and 28 we did not actually vote on, and 29 we voted refer back to the petitioner already.
27 and 28 they were withdrawn.
withdrew them.
They were withdrawn, so we did not actually take our vote because we did not have a second on those before he withdrew.
So I'd like to move for reconsideration of the one we voted on, which was
Well, that
We don't need to reconsider that one.
That one was refer back. So by referring back, he gets what he's looking for, the ability to withdraw his article.
So it's 27 and 28.
Yeah, we wanted to reconsider article. So let's put forward a motion to reconsider Article 27 to start.
There was no vote on 27 or 28, so we're looking for.
Oh, just to get a vote. Motion to. Okay, I got you. We don't have to.
Motion to refer back or motion for no action.
Well, wait a minute. I have a question about 29.
Sure. Okay.
We did vote for refer back.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is the difference between a vote to refer back versus no action?
Where it's not a zoning article, very little, from what I understand, Jim.
I'm actually pulling up town council's opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't get to my email.
So here's the question I sent to her, reading the text. Can you confirm that the FinCom chair was, and I'm sorry, Mark, not correct in saying that the no action vote would essentially table these articles for 2 years? I want to make sure I understand the full context. She said, the zoning bylaw amendments rejected by town meeting may not be brought forward for 2 years without approval by planning board. Case law provides that referring back to committee is not the same as negative action. Essentially, what you were doing, a no action or referring back to committee, as far as these 3 articles are concerned, do essentially the same thing. It's up to the preference of the finance committee.
Right, because
So
none of them were zoning related.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So 29 is good as it states.
I'm sorry, just a note, I'm looking at the bottom. She said, in theory, it's a nicer way to say no action or pass over. So that was her opinion. That's her legal.
Oh, yeah.
Nicer way to
The
say.
refer back is a nice way of saying no thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, alrighty. So for 27, do I have a motion?
I make no action.
What was that, Susan?
No action on 27 would be my motion.
Okay. Do I have a second for no action?
Second.
Second by Josette, okay. Let's see, second. Susan's the main motion for no action. So the motion is.
One more time, what are our options here?
Well, right now we've got a motion and seconded, so we do a vote based on no action. If the no action does not get a majority vote, then we basically have no motion to go forward. We would need to revisit and either say favorable action or refer back to petitioner to get a confirmed vote on the books. Alrighty. So right now, the motion is for no action. And we'll need to do a roll call because it's been seconded.
Mark, just before you start the roll call, I just got a text from Dan Bruce that something's up with cable. He said suddenly at 9 p.m. live stream started running from last Monday's FinCom. So take your vote. I'm going to go down the hall and talk to Patrick.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yep. Okay. All right. So we have a motion for no action that's been seconded. Denny?
Sorry, if I may, before you vote, Petra
Sure.
Disc Walpole TV, we have fixed that. Sorry about our blip, but that's fixed. We
So
should be good now.
back online? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so for purposes of cable, we'll restate it. Article 27, there's a motion for no action that's been moved by Susan, seconded by Josette. Everybody understands what a yay or nay vote means? Denny?
Yes.
Josette?
Yes.
Ally?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. 14-0-0 for no action. Article 28,
I move for no action.
motion by Susan, seconded by Josette. Same situation. Denny?
Yes.
Josette?
Yes.
Ally?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, so 14-0-0 for no action on 28. Article 25, the solar overlay zoning bylaw adjustment. As of just before 6 o'clock yesterday, the developer / petitioner requested to remove their article. So they've asked us to vote no action so that they can review their proposal in more detail and come back in the spring.
Wow.
Really?
Yes, they did not.
Any reason given? Or?
Did not give Jim a reason why, and Jim has not gotten back yet. So I don't know if he's picked up anything new since then. But they basically wanted to defer until the spring.
Too bad. For no action on Article 25.
Well, if you do no action where it is a zoning bylaw for overlay, it would block them for 2 years.
Then I
refer back. Okay. So Susan is refer back.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Josette.
Any way we can wait for Jim to see if he's got any more insight before we take a vote?
Sure.
Just curious.
Yeah. Just for a heads up, Jim does not have numbers ready for Article 2, so we will be looking for recommendation at town meeting. As he goes through his items, he may just make that a no action article depending on what he thinks the magnitude is, and then just come back to us for reserve fund transfers. But when he gets back, we'll talk more on that. Articles 14 and 15, I have substitute numbers for both those articles. A discussion Jim and I have had, but we'll approach that also. And there was also some interest in reconsidering Article 11, which was the capital
Equipment.
Was the
capital equipment
budget with regards to the high school sign. So we'll have a presentation of some comments from the person who wants to reconsider, and then if we wish to reconsider it, it would require a vote, and then we could come up with an alternate motion or the same motion. Jim, welcome back.
Hi.
Article 25, the solar overlay. It is a zoning article. Right now, the recommendation is to refer back to petitioner. Did you get any more insight from them as to why they wanted to withdraw?
Actually, because so just quick background, Mark, I don't know what you told everyone. I got word that they wanted to withdraw late, and I sent them a note asking why. You know, we've got the ball in motion. They said they had some hiccups on their part, but they wanted to meet with me. Can we meet tomorrow? You know, even just a phone call. So I recommend, I know we're going to print tomorrow. Can we just recommend a recommendation at town meeting, or however you prefer? I want to leave it open. If we could close, if we can get this done, I'd like to get it done. But if there's some hiccups on their end, it can wait to the spring, but the longer it waits, the longer it takes to get online and start the revenue process.
Okay. Susan, do you want to withdraw your motion for refer back and make it recommendation at town meeting?
I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay. Can I get a motion for recommendation at town meeting?
I'll move for recommendation at town meeting.
Okay, by Susan. Seconded by Denny.
Denny.
Okay. So recommendation at town meeting for Article 25. Denny?
Yes.
Josette?
Yes.
Ally?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And myself is yes. Recommendation at town meeting.
So I'm hoping we don't have to wait till town meeting. I'll try to get some clarification, and then if we have to do it, I'd like to do it before then, before the public hearing.
Yep. Okay, Jim, I know we're gonna do recommendation at town meeting on Article 2, but do you want to give us an update as to where you think things are going?
Sure. So the three budgets that I'm keeping a close eye, myself, Jody, Marilyn, and Lisa, is fire, elections, and veterans. Background with fire, we had a fire captain retire. We knew eventually he was coming up. We generally don't budget for that, which we didn't this year. And that was a payout there of his accrued vacation and leave time and everything. So there might be a shortfall there. There's a couple of other expense line items, you know, unexpected repair to a truck, and I think one or two other items. We're actually trying to get the other two expense line items paid for through other sources, COVID money, and then another grant that came up. So right now, I'm not sure if anything's going to happen with that. Elections, there's a lot of added things that we weren't expecting as far as elections related to COVID and early voting that we just didn't know was coming up. So Liz may need something, but she doesn't know. And then veterans, we had an unexpected Family Medical Leave Act there. So there's someone out for an extended period of time. I'm not really sure what's going to happen with that line. And bottom line, I'm leaning towards just saying, let's not do anything, no action on this article. But I want to wait to get closer to town meeting just to see where it goes, because if we take no action, I need the money before May town meeting. I can always come to you folks. You have $460,000 in the reserve fund, and we piecemeal it together. It's totally justifiable. So that's my train of thought on this one.
I mean, dollar wise right now, are you looking at 40, 50, 60? You know, what kind, I mean, you got truck repair and a retirement, those numbers should be.
Fire could be 50, 55. Elections, if I had to put a dollar on it right now, 5 to 10,000. Veterans is actually Kerry and Debbie, the assistant director in the COA, are helping out. You may recall when we took on the assistant director in the COA, part of the job description that we worked in there that person will be responsible for processing the paperwork. So myself, Patrick, Kerry, and Debbie are working closely together with some folks from the state to make sure that the veterans in Walpole don't miss any payments or really skip a beat. And Brendan's working with us from Recreation to start to plan for the Veterans Day ceremony if we have one. So we're piecemealing it together internally right now.
So his existing staff is just juggling work schedule to cover at this point?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I was just looking at order of magnitude compared to our 460 of what we would be looking for?
If you ask me right now, I'd say probably maybe 70,000 if I had to guess.
Yeah, okay. It's manageable. Okay. All right. So to give Jim more time in case something else pops up between now and 3 weeks from now, I would put forward a motion for recommendation at town meeting. Do I have a second? Second by Denny. Okay. All righty. Denny?
Yes.
Josette?
Yes.
Ally? Andrew?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And myself, yes. 14-0-0 recommendation at town meeting. Okay. Article 14, stabilization. I had discussions with Jim, and his original schedule was going to have $500,000 carry forward to Springtown meeting. We still don't know where the state's going at this point. And we definitely want to make contributions to both stabilization and OPEB. And we kind of ran numbers, and to get closer to a safety net, I'm recommending that we do $3 million for stabilization, which would give us an additional $335,000 of free cash if we needed to go back to the till to balance the books, because we cannot use the reserve fund to fund budgets. We can use it to fund unusual expenses and unexpected items. So that can't balance the budget. If the state comes back November 1st saying, okay, we've settled up our budget issues, this is where we're going, and we have to come up with $1 million, I'd like to have $1 million, close to $1 million in free cash, so we can call a special town meeting and appropriate the money and not have to cut budgets mid-year. So that was my thought process of recommending just $3 million for stabilization. Any comments or thoughts?
Is Jim in agreement with that?
Like I always say, it's your budget once I kind of hand these types of things off to you. I understand where you're coming from, Mark. I think the goal is to eventually get to, close as possible to $1 million or so thousand in carryover free cash to give us greater financial flexibility. I'm fine with it. If you don't mind, I'd love to ask Jody's opinion and Marilyn's opinion.
Yeah, they're important.
Oh, yeah.
So Jody,
You muted.
And no, I'm all set. No, I agree with that. I think it's a good idea. We are concerned about the state aid. We just got our assessments lowered, or, we're not, there's a shortfall, we think. So I think this is a great idea. It will help quite a bit.
Yeah, and the thing is, the Springtown meeting will have an article for stabilization and OPEB, and if we can make it through to March, then we can turn around and says, well, we got $940,000. We're going to put back that $300,000 into stabilization. We're going to put back the additional $72,000 or more into OPEB, and still have $500,000 of free cash to tide us over to next fall town meeting. So, that was part of the thought process too. It's free cash, so we can do with it in the spring whatever we don't need to balance the budget with. So we can always go back to these articles in the spring. Andrew.
Just so I understand these numbers, with Mark's motion for $3 million being placed into stabilization, Jim, through you, Mark, Jim, that would bring our stabilization to over $8 million. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I just want to end with a comment, and a positive one. Like, that's amazing. Like, going into this moment of economic uncertainty, I know 2 weeks ago we had a conversation, and I was kind of expressing some anxiety about the high uncertainty as we were talking about Article 3 at that time. But I have to tell you, Jim, and really the whole finance team, so Marilyn and Jody should be applauded. Jim laid it all out in his memo to us for tonight, and I was really convinced. And I think my fears are assuaged big time for this town to have $8 million in stabilization going into, a potential, change in state aid or a projection, according to the assessments that Jody mentioned. I think that's a really positive position to be in. So I just want to end on a high note. I know we dive into the details on union contracts. We have these, debates, but this town is in, given the circumstances, really good financial condition.
Actually, I jumped over Marilyn. Did you have comments you wanted to make about the changes?
No, I agree with Jim and Jody.
Okay.
And Andrew.
And Andrew.
Yeah. Okay. Somebody else tossed a hand up too. I didn't see where it went though.
I think that was me giving the little applause reaction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
So Mark, just to clarify, I ran the numbers real quick.
Yep.
If we go with your number, we'll have market rate based upon our June 30th number is 8,182,382 in there.
Yep.
So just almost $8.2 million in there if we go with the $3 million.
Yeah, and if all goes well, we can put enough money in there to get you to 8.5 in the spring.
Yeah, and I'm fine with the flexibility, and if we're getting closer to the spring, I'm going to put forward a recommendation to put some more money in to both OPEB and stabilization. Yep. And just a couple of things to point out. I think I cited it in one of these my notations as far as where else do we have some money that we could potentially dip into. I put a freeze on a couple of bigger projects, and I didn't include it in the capital budget. That includes $400 for the Walpole High School infrastructure project, $221 for the OPR lobby improvements, high school partial roof replacement, $225, and the South Street, the old building removal at $146. So all four of just those items totals over $1 million, just over. So we have that to dip into. I'd look for everywhere else besides stabilization. That's going to be my last turn if we get in a tough spot.
Well, the other thing too is with roof repairs, you don't want to cancel a roof repair and then have to pay 20% more when you finally get around to it.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. So do I have a second for my motion of $3 million for stabilization? Denny?
Second. Denny?
Yep, you got Denny on that. Okay. All righty.
But was muted.
Okay, Denny, we're doing the vote.
Yes.
Josette?
Yes.
Allie?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Mark? Where'd Mark go?
Mark, thumb up.
Mark, you're muted.
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Jeff? Where's Jeff?
He said, I saw him melt yes, but I don't hear it.
Yeah, he's unmuted, but I couldn't hear him. Yeah, okay. Steve?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay. For $3 million. Okay, Article 15, OPEB, was looking to cut that back to the 250 number to give us an additional 72,500 for free cash, which, like I said, basically gets us up to about $940,000 of free cash. And once again, we can revisit these same articles as part of the spring warrant. If we don't need to use the free cash, we can turn around and boost these numbers back in at the end of the fiscal year. Any questions on my motion for 250?
Oh,
Susan?
okay. I wanted to.
Yep.
Mark has a hand up.
Yep. Mark?
Jim, the amount of 327 that you proposed, how was that calculated?
Actually went back and looked at a couple of years ago. It's a weird formula that we all agreed to, but it's like 2.5% of the first $2 million. I know that number was like $50,000, and then we tried to do a range of 5% to 7% of anything over that of our certified free cash. So that's the formula. I can send that out again to everyone. It's weird the way we came up with it, but we all sat around with.
Yeah, it was 7.5% of anything over 2 million. So yeah, that's how.
Right. So my point is I remember meeting with the select board. We went through. We came up with a plan to fund OPEB. I think it's about $30 million underfunded at this time because as a town, we've made decisions not to keep funding OPEB at certain times. And so I'm going to vote no to change this amount just because I feel that we have that OPEB, it's a liability the town has. We came up with a formula as to how to cover the cost. And now because, and again, I understand the issue and the rationale to put together a bigger reserve, but we're doing it on the back of OPEB. We're doing it on the back of the employees' health plans later on. I understand we can make up for it in March, but I'm just opposed that we rely on OPEB to help cover potential shortfalls versus the town just deciding we're going to make every, capital equipment, school, other costs, and reduce and find the money that way. So I'm just opposed to changing this and not adhering to the formula that we have. Thanks.
Good. Okay. Susan, were you seconding? I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
You got Brian.
You got Brian?
Either way, okay.
Okay.
Similar to Mark, we made an agreement. We talked about it. I think we need to stick to that. In the spring, we didn't put any money into OPEB because of the situation we were in. So I would hate for this to be cut and to keep the can down the road, as they say. So similar to Mark, I am not in favor of reducing the amount.
Okay. General consensus of others? Andrew?
I'm really persuaded, I have to say, by what the intent of what Mark Sullivan and Brian are saying. I think Mark Trudell, in working with Jim, is probably just being prudent to say, well, we'll make up for it in the spring. But again, I think Brian's point, Mark Sullivan's point is that we made a commitment to fight this $30+ million liability, and it feels a little tough to back out of it. But I'm torn, honestly.
Susan?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I remember the formula that we arrived at, but I also think we can't pretend COVID didn't happen. And it is happening. So it's not actually behind us. And I am reluctant to put money into a fund that is gone forever, beyond our grasp, in light of the uncertainties we're still facing. I think it's makes more sense to react to the current situation and hold back. We can put the money in later, but I just think these are very uncertain times, and I think that we would be wise to make the contribution, but not as much as we were planning to. So I'm in favor of it.
Actually, just want to touch base with Marilyn real quick. The OPEB fund, basically, whatever goes in stays there until we are 100% funded. Is that correct?
Is Marilyn on? I thought I saw her.
Yeah, I'm here. I just,
Yeah.
I know Parker talked about it.
Are you talking about the health insurance option on it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Marilyn and Jody, we just recently, we have a new actuarial conducting our OPEB review. He's just about done with it. But we actually brought this up because we've always worked under the assumption is once it's there, you can never go out. You can never go out and try to recapture it. He reminded us that there's a section of the law that allows us to go back and basically fund our health insurance money through that. So let's say the health insurance line is $10 million and we're realizing that the budget is in really bad shape. That's the only line that we could put OPEB money into.
And it can only go against current retirees.
Right.
So your current retirees make up $1 million of that, then you could take $1 million from OPEB to fund that budget line item. Yes.
Right. It's only the retiree portion
Yeah,
of the current health insurance that we could take out.
right. But then you're going backwards on trying to reach your goal of funding everything forward. So,
True.
yeah. So we can get to it. It's just a case of we would prefer not to put it in and have to then try to get it back out to fund a budget line.
But if it was really drastic, you could.
Is that a 2/3 vote or a simple majority on that one?
I believe it's 2/3.
2/3, I thought so also. Actually, so Susan, did you say you did or didn't second that motion?
I did, yes.
You did, okay. So we do have a motion, and it's been seconded for $250,000. If it fails to pass, then we're back to the original budget number, and we can entertain a new motion. So we will call the roll. Denny?
Yes.
Josette?
Yes.
Ally?
Yes.
Andrew?
No.
Susan?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Kathleen?
No.
Brian?
No.
Lucy?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Doug?
No.
Jeff?
No.
Steve?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 6. The motion carries.
Oh, Mark, just running the numbers real quick, and Jody verified these for me.
Yeah.
That'll allow us to have the flexibility of having 912,856 free cash to carry forward to the spring.
Okay. And we'll make it our priorities to reinstate the OPEB and stabilization if the funds are available at Springtown meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Mark?
Yes.
So how much are we, what was the amount going into OPEB now?
250,000.
Okay, thanks.
Mark, can I ask a question?
Sure, Mark.
I'm just concerned, not concerned, just wondering the rationale that you had with stabilization and OPEB, that why didn't you decide to fully fund OPEB and just cut back more on stabilization? You know, make it 2,800,000 or whatever it would be, and OPEB stays at the same formula that we've agreed to.
A combination of round numbers were easier to work with, and also the fact that once, like we said, once it goes into OPEB, we've only got one mechanism to use it for, and it's to fund retirees' health benefits. And I just felt that having both give a little made more sense, so that we have the most flexibility of accessing funds if we need it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I know there was some follow-up questions on Article 11 with regards to Walpole High School sign. Jeff, were you leading off on that?
Yeah, Denny, you want me to take it, or you want to?
Yeah, go right ahead, please.
So I just want to make a couple of points, guys, and I'm not going to get into anything regarding rebranding, anything like that. I want to take that conversation off the table. I know it came up, you know, and possibly rightfully so or not. But, you know, 2 points I want to make. And Chief Carmichael, I'm glad you're still on, hanging in there. And I want to bring back to the police station sign that was put up on Common Street and South Street. And, you know, this never went to FinCom. It wasn't a decision of FinCom. It was a decision of the Permanent Building Committee, of which I'm a member. And it was brought forward to us as a change order. A change order as part of a capital budget, capital infrastructure project. And Chief Carmichael's staff, you know, former deputy chief at the time, as well as current Lieutenant Zangetti, you know, one of the stipulations in us approving that sign and you know, making sure we had the money as part of the change order to be able to implement that, put that there, was really them reaching out to the community, making sure that they had buy-in, from the residents of South Street, residents of Common Street that were most impacted by that. And those conversations happened. The community input was provided. And, you know, as part of the permanent building committee and you know, our charter, you know, we approved that funding. And as you probably saw from Richard Pila's presentation, we were still under budget on that entire project as a whole. So great news on that. One of the things, you know, that just kind of bothers me about just a request for $60,000 to put up a new digital sign, bright blue lights, right in front of the high school is that to date, and I have asked Jim this as well, I haven't seen any input, community outreach that I know of that the school department or the school committee has done to the neighbors or surrounding, you know, to the community, to the students, that. You know, the other thing is we're talking about one of the most historical streets, you know, in our town. And we're potentially looking at putting up another big digital sign. You know, what is that, 500 feet, 5,000 feet apart from where we already have one. You know, I just think there needs to be more discussion on this. We made a decision. I appreciate all the, you know, all the input that went into it. It was great discussion. And I didn't want to just pick apart this one article. You know, I believe, and maybe you can kind of talk to what the current process is, Chief, through you, Mr. Trudell. You know, I believe there's, I don't know which one to call them, but service level agreements in place with the neighbors where the signs only illuminated for certain hours during the day. You know, there was a lot of research, a lot of fine tuning as to, you know, how bright the sign would be. And all that happened as part of the funding request. And I just want to make that clear. Chief, I want to, if you've got any opportunity right now to kind of speak to that. And then there's one more point I want to make before we. Go ahead.
Sure. Hi, everyone again. Yeah, that's everything you said is exactly right. One of the things we did when we moved to a neighborhood from the center of town was we created liaisons for the neighborhood. There's a couple times we've had meetings with people, just so that the neighbors had kind of a conduit, you know, to the police department. And obviously, like if I'm not here, the deputy's not here, we have that liaison, that person they can talk to and send off any concerns or complaints or anything like that. We've obviously, during that transition, we've had many different things that have come up, the sign being one of them. And we have had to work with some of the neighbors on Common Street to because that's their home. So we have to make sure that, you know, it's not interrupting their quality of life. So there's been times when we've had to adjust the sign, the lighting on the sign, and that kind of thing. The good thing about it is if somebody makes it, you know, complains about it or whatever else, we have the remote access to it. So we can go right on and, you know, we can dim it, change the messages on and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, some of them we've had, you know, our patch like show up and then arrows, and, you know, that might be something that becomes just annoying to somebody. So one of the neighbors. So that's, yeah, we just try and work with them, but there certainly was a lot of making sure that we vetted the neighborhood. I think in the beginning, we actually went around and handed out a flyer so that everybody knew what was going on in case they didn't. And ever since, it's been very good. I mean, we've made all the adjustments, I think, at this point, and I think it looks beautiful, and it's very, it helps us in getting the message out. And so far, it's been good since those early times.
Thank you for that, Chief. You know, I think the point I want to make is, you know, Chief Carmichael can come in, you know, and obviously advise on lessons learned relative to a digital sign and, you know, being kind of the host of that digital sign. But, you know, most importantly was the community outreach that went into the planning of that. And I just haven't seen that or heard of that, you know, going into this funding request. The second point I want to make is I just found it a little odd that the sign, which is meant to be a permanent structure, which I would assume would have a shelf life of 30 plus or minus years, would be considered a piece of equipment. You know, my feeling was that it should have been a capital infrastructure line item But I think the reason for that would be that that would negate being able to use cable funds for the funding source for that. So that's where I stand. You know, I talked to Denny a little. I talked to a few folks. Guys, going in with an 8 to 6 at town meeting, I think sends a message. And right now, there are very important funding requests in that capital equipment article. For example, I think there's cruisers in there, there's fire hoses. You know, there's $2 million worth of very critical funding needs that are in there. And if the 8 to 6 carries weight at town meeting, we're in potential jeopardy of, you know, really jeopardizing the entire thing. So, yeah.
Ally?
Mark, I'm glad this is coming up tonight because honestly, after the meeting, I was one of the yeses, but I would like to reconsider this article for the reasons Jeff has stated with not reaching out to the neighborhood. Afterwards, I'm uncomfortable with it, so I would like to reconsider this article.
Okay. Is that a motion to reconsider?
I will make a motion to reconsider Article 11.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
I think I got Jeff on that.
Yeah, get Jeff. Yep.
Now get Joe set on that.
He's done the work here.
Alrighty. So Ally, motion, second. Okay, so we have a motion to reconsider Article 11. Jim, just before we vote on that, capital budget items, is there a requirement if we're doing work on town property to notify abutters and to have a public hearing or an input?
Good question.
You're muted, Jeff.
There's requirements to notify our butters, but I know that there's some education incentives in there. And quite honestly, I haven't gone back and reviewed the zoning bylaws of this and asked Mike for his input. Jeff and I did talk today, so I was somewhat expecting that this might come up. And I actually, Mark, I sent you a draft motion on this because this hasn't happened for a while, but the finance committee in years past has gone in and made some changes. So I just wanted to be really clear in your direction to me, so I put everything together correctly and with the motions. So the motion I drafted was move to reconsider Article 11 for the purpose of removing the item titled WHS signboard, which totals $60,000 with the proposed funding source, Walpole Cable Funds. So if that's your intent tonight, I would ask Ally to amend her motion. So I just have everything lined up the way you guys want it.
Okay. So Ally, you want to amend your motion to as stated by Jim?
I'm happy to do that. It seems that Susan has her hand up.
Okay.
You're muted,
Susan.
I want to understand, is the intent to remove the sign, but then we would vote on everything else in this article?
Yes.
Yes. So once we remove the sign, then we would vote favorable action on the remaining ballots.
And the other question I have is, has anybody in all of this discussion that's happened in between meetings, talked to anybody from the school department?
I have not had a chance to make a phone call over to them. Been kind of busy at work, but I will definitely reach out to them tomorrow.
The problem I'm having with reconsideration is, I just don't understand why we would take action without a consultation with the school department and find out some of the answers to the questions that are being thrown out there. It just seems to me we're operating on, suppositions and what our thoughts are about what has or has not been done. So I'm puzzled about this.
So I can tell you, Susan, I did let Mike Fisher and Bridget know that there was a discussion a few nights ago about this, and that 6 members of the committee voted against this item. Quite honestly, I did not tell Mike or Bridget about tonight because I didn't know if it was going to go anywhere. I prepared a motion to cover all my bases. So I can tell you that the school administration put this request together. The school committee voted favorable action on their requests that were submitted. So the school committee has discussed this publicly. The capital budget committee discussed this for at least 2 meetings, at the meeting where they deliberated with the school folks and where they took their votes. So it's been discussed publicly, but I agree with you, Susan. I just texted both Mike and Bridget, but I don't have a response and it's almost 10 o'clock. So they might be in bed and it's getting pretty late. So I think the right thing to do would be to afford them the opportunity to come in and explain their reasoning to you folks.
Right.
Jim, as far as capital budget goes, I was not there because that was the night of the election, but they did their presentation and the voting was done that same night. So it was not 2 nights of discussion.
I think I had Andrew, then Denny.
I just want to echo what Steve said. You know, it's worth hearing from Bridget, Superintendent Goff, and from Chair Nancy Galvin of the school committee. I mean, maybe the real true intent is because of the hybrid remote schedules, and it would be great to have an electronic sign to kind of telegraph and communicate on Common Street who is going where. I'm just speculating. I don't know. I want to know more before we try to pull that out.
Yeah, everyone voted last week without hearing from them. So I don't understand what the difference is now between a week ago and now. They didn't come in and talk or present, so.
Well, to me, through you, Mr. Chairman, the difference is now we're talking about taking something out because there are questions, but we're not going to them to see to get the answers to the questions that we have. We're just deciding on our own that it ought to be taken out because we have questions. There's a difference between deciding to support something that's, based on the information that we have versus saying, we're just going to pull this out and not fund it. I see a big difference.
We should hear from them as to what their reasoning behind this is.
Brian?
But it's not like we're saying no forever. We're kind of just hitting the pause button at this time based on the knowledge we have. That's how I'm viewing this. And if more members have more questions at this time, I think it is the right thing to do at this time.
Hang on, Susan. Jim, right now there's a motion to reconsider that's been seconded. And the motion is for the intent to remove a line item from the funding package. If that gets defeated, then the original motion stands. If it passes, can we introduce a recommendation at town meeting and wait for school committee to get back to us before making the final determination to pull out the 60 or leave the 60?
Yeah, I think that would be a fair compromise, Mark. I'm mindful of things on your agenda, and I just posted that in the notes. When we worked up the agenda, I did do a catch-all discussion regarding all articles. So I think we're covered with the open meeting law, but I understand where Denny's coming from. Yeah, they weren't here at the last meeting when we discussed this. They're not here tonight, but if the committee's going to vote that way, I think that's a compromise. If you just recommend the town meeting so we can, Mark, you can write your letter and we can go to print tomorrow. So.
Yeah.
Because you got to. But right now, the vote that's going to go in the book is going to say 8-6 on the article, and I have to explain why it was 8-6 in the article, and it will potentially raise a lot of discussion at town meeting, or I can basically say that within the budget, within the capital budget items, there was discussion on particular points that we are researching further, and therefore could not reach a decision in time for this booklet. And I don't have to elaborate on which items, but basically, it puts everybody on alert that we are still researching something. And it doesn't go into the book saying we were 8-6 because a portion of our board did not like the sign in front of the high
Mark,
school.
should we do a motion to reconsider and then a motion to refer to amend the town meeting?
Recommendation at town meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
Ally, I
that's,
guess
So Ally, you gotta change your motion one more time.
I am going to change my motion for a motion to reconsider Article 11 and
so that we can make a
to
recommendation
make
at
a
town meeting.
recommendation at town meeting.
Second.
Okay. Seconded by Josette. Okay, let me see here, get my notes down as to who's doing what. Motion by Ally, seconded by Josette. So this is the motion to reconsider, requires a simple majority vote to remove our prior vote, and then we will have to take the new motion up and vote that also. So Denny?
Yes.
Consider yes.
Yes.
Josette?
Yes.
Ally? Andrew?
Sure, why not?
Susan?
You're muted, Sue.
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Mark?
Can you just explain to me what it is we're doing right now?
We're basically moving to throw out our previous vote and then take a new motion to make a recommendation at town meeting so that we can get the school committee in to state their case with regards to the sign.
Okay.
Before we.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Yep. Doug?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Steve?
Yes.
And myself, yes. So motion is carried to reconsider 13-1-0. Now I'll entertain a motion for recommendation at town meeting
So moved.
by Susan. Okay,
May I ask a question?
sure.
Is it possible that we could vote on this prior to our open public meeting and have the school department
Yes,
answer to what the questions are from our board
yeah,
at that time?
Yes.
yeah.
Good.
To
That-
follow
that-
up on Josette's comments, can you get me your specific questions in writing? So I want to make sure Mike and Bridget and their team are prepared. So, you know, Jeff and Ally, you said you had some items and everyone else. So could you get them into me so I can get them prepared?
Yes.
Sure.
We'll go over schedule right after this vote.
So I made a motion. Was it seconded?
I will second it if it wasn't.
It was not, right? So Denny seconded. Okay.
And what's the motion, I think?
The motion now is to make a recommendation at town meeting. So between now and our public hearing, we will have the school department come in, present their case, and also we can maybe get the cable committee to confirm that the sign board would be an appropriate use of cable funds, if that's an issue.
So it just allows us time to do more.
Due diligence,
Yeah, exactly.
okay?
And we have to have a vote for the booklet. So, I mean, because tonight's the last night to vote for the booklet, that's why to vote now, but we'll reconsider it before town meeting.
Right.
Just to follow up on Denny's comments. So just looking at my cheat sheet here for town meeting, we also need to talk about the recommendation at town meeting for South Street. So
Yep.
I'll schedule both of those on the same night.
Yep, and your Article 2 also.
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Alrighty. So we've got a motion that's been seconded for recommendation at town meeting. Denny,
Yes.
Josette,
Yes.
Ally,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
yep, I couldn't see you, yeah. Kathleen,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
yourself is a yes. 14-0-0 to recommendation at town meeting. Jim, are we gonna go forward with Tuesday, October 13th for public hearing?
Yes, I'm expecting that Dan's gonna have the whole town meeting on the 17th. He has to file the necessary paperwork with our office, and the chief has to notify, I believe it's the AG. Liz has to do a couple of things, so that Tuesday matches up with what's required in the charter. And I know that's kind of an awkward night, so I request that we do it at 6 o'clock. Because I have the select board's posted for 7, so 6 o'clock public hearing.
6 o'clock for the public hearing. Okay.
That's October 13th?
Yeah, day after Columbus Day, right?
Susan's got her hand up.
Yep. Susan?
So if we have the public hearing Tuesday, the 13th at 6, when would we discuss these articles? Like 4 o'clock?
It would be my intention
I prefer the prior Monday.
Okay.
I prefer Monday the 5th.
That's fine.
Or Thursday the 8th, you know, Mark, we can talk to you.
Yeah, I prefer Mondays over Thursdays, but yeah.
I'll put that on Monday, okay. Then let's tentatively plan on the Monday then, okay?
Monday the 5th?
The 5th?
At our regular time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. What I just wanted to, before anybody motions to adjourn, you should have gotten an email about the school building committee's meeting, that they're having a meeting for the public on Zoom. It'll be Wednesday, the 23rd of September at 7 p.m. If you did not get that email with the Zoom link, just contact me and I'll forward mine to you or make sure that you get it. But it did appear to me that they had copied everybody on the finance committee.
Okay. Alrighty. Jim, anything else for tonight?
No, thank you all. I know it was a long night, but I'm glad we got through everything.
Yeah, it's one of our longest nights in a while, but there was a lot of information to digest and a lot of good questions.
This committee's getting fun. We don't all agree with everyone. This is good. It probably gives Jim a heart attack a little bit, but otherwise.
Oh, it certainly does.
Thank you, everyone, for your time and your commitment. Motion to adjourn. Seconded by Denny. Alrighty. Denny.
Yes.
Josette.
Yes.
Allie.
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes.
Susan. Lisa.
Yes.
Kathleen.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Lucy. Mark.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Yes.
Jeff. Steve.
Yes.
Myself. Yes. Thank you, everyone. Jim, do you need the letter tomorrow or can Monday morning be good?
Kelly needs it by noon tomorrow. Sorry.
Good
I'll
night,
be
Mark.
spending another hour or something. Thank you. I started it yesterday. I got a lot of plans.
So our next.